Chapter 81. Hu Xiangning's gaze frightened Hu Yan. It was as if he had guessed what she was thinking. She blushed and didn't know what to say. Fortunately, Hu Xiangning spoke, "All right, since that's the case, I'll send Gao Xing to go with you." With him, Wang Go won't dare to not let them go. With Hu Xiangning's support, Hu Yan believed that she could bring Yang Duo to the Yang village. She was overjoyed and said, "Father is the best." Father has always been the best person. But remember, you must bring back toilet paper this time. Don't be so happy that you forget about the important matter. Hu Xiangning decided to remind his daughter. If she really went to see the sixth young master and forgot about other things, then the gains would not make up for the losses. "Yes, father, you can rest assured." Hu Yan patted her towering chest and promised. Then, she had a grin on her face. Hu Yan went to prepare and said goodbye to little Qing. It was a pity that she couldn't bring her to see the sixth young master for the first time. This made little Qing even sadder on the bed. In her heart, she even thought that the young miss was different. Hu Xiangning called Gao Xing over and told him to cooperate with the young Mississippi. Then he thought to himself, a grown girl can't be kept at home. Yang Village. In the courtyard, 50 boys and girls were undergoing intensive training. According to Yang Qindong's requirements, they were all between 14 and 18 years old and all of them had good figures. The girls were graceful and the boys were tall and straight. After praising Qiao Yin, he asked Yi Qiu'er to make a delicious meal for the 100 boys and girls, letting them fully experience the feeling of warmth. Then he took out the clothes that he had already prepared. When everyone changed into the new clothes, it was as if they had become different people. They were full of spirit and beauty. "Not bad, you all have good external conditions, but this is not enough." "But that's not enough. If you can't pass the next training, you'll still be eliminated. Do you understand?" Yang Qindong stood in front of 100 people like a general who was called out on the battlefield. His voice was like a flood. "Understood," the young boys and girls replied nervously. Here, they had new clothes to wear, and they could eat meat for every meal. Moreover, the dishes were very delicious. Every month, they would receive 2 taels of silver. This new life filled them with hope. After experiencing this wonderful feeling, they would not be willing to leave even if they were asked to. How could they not perform well? Yang Qindong's voice echoed throughout the backyard. "Stand up straight, look straight ahead, and bend the corners of your mouth to a 45-degree angle. Keep smiling. Remember, the customer is God. You have to try your best to satisfy their needs. Their satisfaction is my satisfaction. Do you understand?" "Understood." The 100 people replied in unison. "Young master," Tiger's mane suddenly appeared and half knelt in front of Yang Qindong. "Seventh young mistress is here. Seventh sister." Yang Qindong's face showed a gentle expression. It was completely different from when he was lecturing the 100 people. "Seventh sister is not an outsider. Invite her here. She might be in a better mood if she sees the children." "Yes. Young master, Miss Xiang has been waiting outside the manor for 4 hours. What do you think?" Tiger's mane did not leave immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and continued to report. "Tell her that I have something to do today. I'll see her another day." Yang Qindong waved his hand. Since Miss Xiang was late to find out, she had to pay the price. After understanding Yang Qindong's intention, Tiger's mane stood up and left. Outside the manor, Yang Duo sat in the carriage with a gloomy face. She had a snow-white oval face and a pair of black eyes under her slender eyebrows. However, there was no light in her eyes. Instead, there was a hint of sadness. Once upon a time, Yang Duo was the apple of the Yang family's eye. Because she was the youngest daughter, she was doted on by her parents. When Yang Rong was studying in the study, he was willing to hold this youngest daughter in his arms. That was also the best time of Yang Duo's life. She never had anything to worry about. She could eat delicious food and wear the most beautiful clothes every day. However, everything changed with her father's death. After Yang Rong's death, Yang Duo only felt that the mountain she relied on collapsed. The world in her eyes also lost its former glory. It was as if the entire family changed at that moment. Her brothers and sisters were busy with their own things. Even her only mother had no time to care about other things because of her poor health. It was as if she was forced to grow up overnight. Yang Duo was no longer the little girl who was willing to joke. She became silent. Until she grew up and married Wang Go. Although this marriage did not seem to be blessed by the Yang family, in Yang Duo's eyes, Wang Go was a man who relied on his own struggles to grow up. He should be better than her brothers and sisters who relied on their birth. He should know how to work hard and know how to cherish everything that was hard to come by. When they first got married, the days were barely passable. The relationship between husband and wife was harmonious, but as the influence of the Yang family weakened, her status in the Wang family also declined day by day. In addition, the things she knew were too few, so in the end, she was reduced to the point where the maids in the residence dared to give her a hard time and bully her. At this moment, Yang Duo missed her father's wide embrace. However, she knew that everything was gone and could not be returned. In the most bitter days, Yang Duo even thought of dying. However, when she thought of how she would explain to her parents in the afterlife if she died like this, she could only force herself to live on. She hoped that one day, Wang Go would change his mind or someone in the Yang family could revive their glory. This was the sorrow of a woman in a feudal society. Everything had to rely on others. It was extremely difficult to rely on oneself to change anything. Fortunately, a life that should have been hopeless had a comprehensive change because of Yang Dong's unexpected arrival. That morning, the moment Yang Qindong kicked open the Wang family's door, Yang Duo's fate also changed. Her husband and mother-in-law being beaten made them start to face themselves again. At least in these few days, she slowly felt that her dignity was respected again. Although this respect was only on the surface, Yang Duo was still full of hope in her heart. Today, Hu Yan's sudden appearance, accompanied by the captain of the brocade guard, was to invite her back to the Yang family manor. In this regard, Wang Go did not dare to have the slightest objection. He even forced out a smile and said that if she wanted, she could stay at her maternal home for a few more days. Feeling that Wang Go was not concerned but afraid, Yang Duo's heart was filled with mixed feelings. What made her even more afraid was how to face her seventh brother. The person who would only follow behind her when they were young and whom she despised had finally grown up. Not only that, he seemed to be even more outstanding than her brothers. When she thought of the heroic aura that her sixth brother exuded when he kicked open the Wang family's door that morning, Yang Duo blushed with shame and did not dare to meet him. This was also why after a few days, she still did not come to the Yang family manor to take a look. In the carriage, Yang Duo was very nervous, which made Hu Yan, who should have been nervous, relax a lot. She began to comfort Yang Duo. Sister Duo, the sixth young master is your brother and is so nervous about you. What are you afraid of? Listen to your younger sister, when you see him, you should reprimand him first to suppress his imposing manner. Hu Yan thought of Yang Qindong being scolded and not daring to talk back, and couldn't help but giggle. Scold sixth brother? Why? Also, what should I scold him for? Yang Duo's face was filled with confusion. Clearly, she did not understand what Hu Yan meant. You. Hu Yan put her finger to her mouth and rolled her eyes. Suddenly, she said in surprise, scold him for beating your husband and mother-in-law. Let him give you an explanation. In short, you have to shock him first and let him know how powerful you are. Hu Yan's idea made Yang Duo shake her head and say, I'm not powerful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have suffered such a big loss in the Wang family. Forget it, I'd better not scold sixth brother. He beat the imperial court officials for me. He took a great risk. Hu Yan slowly closed her mouth. She knew that it was impossible to see Yang Qindong suffer. Seventh young lady, the young master invites you in." Outside, Hu Meng arrived in front of the carriage. He signaled Yang Lu with his eyes, and Yang Lu replaced the original coachman. Gao Sheng was also sent far away. Yang Lu then drove the carriage into the Yang clan manor. The East faction protector, who was standing nearby, saw that the carriage was driven by the Yang family's servant, so he did not come up to check. After a few days of contact, the two sides had a tacit understanding. The East faction protector and the genie guard would not take the initiative to trouble the Yang family. The Yang family's servants also followed the rules. All the carriages that came here were checked by those people, except for the Yang family's carriages. In Yang Qindong's words, this was the Yang family manor. Did the Yang family need to check their own home? What was the reason? For this matter, the East faction protector also reported the matter to Wang Zhen, but the answer he got was that since the sixth young master said so, he would do as he said. The carriage smoothly drove into the Yang family manor. Through the curtain of the carriage, Hu Yan looked out curiously. However, it didn't seem to be any different from the other manors, which made her feel a little disappointed. It was not until the carriage drove into the square in the backyard of the Yang family manor that the scene in front of her changed. She saw 100 boys and girls wearing clothes that she had never seen before standing under the scorching sun, motionless. God! The clothes they wear are so beautiful. Hu Yan's gaze was deeply attracted by the scene in front of her as she spoke like a love-struck fool. Chapter 82. Yang Duo, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. She didn't know what to say when she saw Yang Qindong. She thought that her actions had already lost face for the Yang family. She wasn't mentally prepared yet. The carriage finally stopped, not far from Yang Qindong. From here, one could clearly see Yang Qindong, dressed in green, sitting under a parasol, leisurely drinking tea. From time to time, he would look at the scene. Whenever he found someone slacking while standing, he would shout from afar. Every time this happened, the person who was shouted would straighten their body, as if their entire appearance had changed in an instant. Stop! Yang Qindong's attention was drawn to the carriage when Yang Lu shouted for it to stop. Then he came over with a smile on his face. As he walked, he said, "Seventh sister, I missed you so much." As he spoke, Yang Qindong had already arrived in front of the carriage. Then, he reached out his hand and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Then, he smiled and reached out his hand to touch the person in the carriage. This was originally Yang Qindong's way of welcoming seventh sister. He hoped that a joke would make her relax. How could the meticulous sixth young master not know that seventh sister must have had a hard time in the Wang family all these years? She had probably developed a habit of being cautious. Welcoming her in such a joking way was to make her relax. But he never thought that his hand would reach out and grab the person, but why did this person look so unfamiliar? Her skin was whiter than snow, and her eyes were like a pool of clear water. When she looked around, she had an elegant and noble temperament. Her eyes were very big, and her eyelashes were very long. At this moment, she was blinking and looking at him. That cute and chubby little face was as red as an apple. In fact, Hu Yan really did not expect this to happen. At this time, she was also frightened by the scene in front of her. When a pair of big hands were stuck under her armpits, her beautiful face had already turned pale at this moment. Shua! Yang Qindong's reaction was not slow. When he felt that he had grabbed the wrong person, he quickly retracted his hand and immediately bowed his head to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mississippi. I thought it was my seventh sister. I'm here." A timid voice sounded. Yang Duo popped her head out from behind Hu Yan, who was still in a panic. "Sixth brother, this is Miss Hu Yan, Lord Hu Zhangning's daughter." As if she felt the awkward atmosphere, Yang Duo hurriedly introduced Hu Yan's identity. Hearing seventh sister say that this girl was Hu Yan, Yang Qindong could not help sizing her up a few more times. She was indeed a great beauty. In terms of looks, she was similar to Zhao Liang, but her body was more voluptuous. "So it's Miss Hu. My apologies. Yang Qindong's reaction was fast. After knowing Hu Yan's identity, he immediately changed into a polite appearance, making people unable to get angry even if they wanted to. Yang Qindong took the initiative to apologize, which made Hu Yan a little embarrassed. She really didn't mean it. In addition, she had been educated since she was young. No matter what, she was still a daughter of a noble family. Of course, it was not good for her to blame the other party for such a thing. Hu Yan's face was red like the sunset. She softly said, "Hello, sixth young master." "Hello, hello." Yang Qindong quickly returned to normal. After answering with a smile, he reached out and helped Yang Duo, who had already squeezed forward, get off the carriage. As for Hu Yan, Yang Qindong did not want to offend her. He reached out and took the stool handed over by Yang Lu, allowing her to smoothly walk down by herself. Yang Duo did not pay attention to Hu Yan's change. She had been chirping like a lark in the car just now, but now she was as quiet as a thrush and didn't say a word. Most of her attention was on her sixth brother, Yang Qindong. With Yang Qindong holding her hand, she heard her sixth brother's voice. "Seventh sister, these people are the people I've trained to serve the immortal abode in the future. In other words, they are the waiters in the wine shop. Do you see the clothes those girls are wearing? I call them kipeos. They are the best clothes to show off a woman's perfect figure. The other big sisters in the family have all tried them on before. Why don't you find one and change into it, too? A beautiful set of clothes can change a person's mood at any time." Yang Qindong didn't ask Yang Duo what she meant. He reached out and called Xiao Yin over. "Yin, bring my seventh sister to change into a qipao." "Young master, what about that Miss Hu?" Xiao Yin looked at Hu Yan, who seemed to have been left out. "Oh. If Miss Hu is willing, she can also try on a qipao. There are many different types and colors prepared. Just treat it as my apology for my earlier rudeness." Yang Qindong chuckled and turned to look at Hu Yan. On the way, Hu Yan had been teaching Yang Duo to be more generous. She had even told her to teach Yang Qindong a lesson and show him who was boss. However, when she saw the real person, she immediately softened. Yang Duo acted as if she had returned home. She didn't even wait for Hu Yan to say whether she agreed or not before grabbing her. "Come, let's go take a look at those kipeos. Let's see if they are really as beautiful as they seem." Three women made a show. Xiao Yin, Yang Duo, and Hu Yan all walked towards the rear courtyard. Yang Qindong smiled as he watched the three leave. When they were no longer in sight, he turned around. Tiger's Mane and Yang Lu were already half kneeling on the ground. "Didn't you check the carriage before?" Clearly, Yang Qindong was reprimanding them for their earlier rudeness to Hu Yan. It is this subordinate's dereliction of duty. I originally thought that since it was Miss Seven's carriage, there was no need to check it. Tiger's Mane lowered his head. He knew that he had really made a mistake this time. Fortunately, it was Miss Hu Yan who came. If it was an assassin, the sixth young master would have been in danger. The Yang clan was his own family. There was no need to check. This was Yang Qindong's previous order. There was nothing wrong with them following orders. For a moment, the sixth young master couldn't punish them. He could only shake his head and say, "Forget it. This won't happen again. In the future, we still have to check the carriage. At the very least, we can't let any bad people sneak in. Also, have you prepared the people I asked you to prepare to serve Miss Seven? They are ready. They are in the rear courtyard. I'll tell them to get ready immediately." Tiger's Mane knew that this matter was over. However, he definitely couldn't be so careless next time. "Good. Go and tell them to get ready." Yang Qindong nodded. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked, "That's right. Do you know why Miss Hu Yan came here?" From the information he received from the security bureau, he already knew that Hu Yan was paying attention to him. Yang Qindong narcissistically thought that the other party probably had a good impression of him. However, even if she had a good impression of him, it was impossible for her to directly come to his door. At that time, girls weren't that open. This was especially true for young ladies of noble families. They were extremely reserved. I don't know. Tiger's mane shook his head. Although the capital's security bureau's capabilities were constantly increasing after investing a large amount of money, he still didn't know what had just happened to the Hu clan. Forget it. Let's go. With the idea of taking things one step at a time, Yang Qindong had Tiger's mane and the others leave. As for himself, he returned to the large umbrella. His gaze fell on the 100 young men and women who were still practicing their stances in the distance. In the fitting room in the backyard, Xiao Yin and the other 2 women were currently seriously choosing the most suitable qipao for them. Among the 3, it wasn't Xiao Yin's first time in this room. She was also the first to choose. It was a set of sapphire blue qipao that represented purity. When paired with her petite face, it appeared very cute. Yang Duo chose a yellow qipao with golden edges. She was tall to begin with, so wearing it on her slim body made her look even more elegant. Hu Yan took the longest time to choose. In her eyes, it seemed that every one of them was very beautiful. In front of her were beautiful clothes that she had never seen before. In the end, she still chose a white qipao. This was a color that went with all kinds of colors. When worn, it gave off a pure and flawless color that didn't even have a speck of dust. In the fitting room, there were several mirrors that were said to be divine objects in the palace. It was very good for them to see their own style through these mirrors. Of course, these mirrors couldn't be leaked out yet. Xiao Yin also explained this point to the 2 women. Otherwise, the mirrors in the palace wouldn't seem so noble and mysterious. However, Xiao Yin also said that mirrors like these would be circulated in the market in the future. It was just that there wouldn't be a lot of them. In accordance with the principle of rare things being valuable, this would show off their nobility. As for the mirrors, the 2 women only looked at them curiously. If it was any other time, perhaps they would be attracted. However, right now, their attention was completely diverted by the qipao on their bodies. Right now, they were looking at themselves as if they had just met each other. In their minds, they never thought that one day they would be so beautiful. To say something narcissistic, at this moment, even they were attracted to themselves. Alright. Seeing Hu Yan and Yang Duo spin in front of the mirrors who knew how many times, Xiao Yin smiled like a flower and said, "The ugly daughter-in-law will have to see her parents-in-law sooner or later. Let's let the young master take a look and let him give his opinion." The young master said that women wear beautiful clothes for others to see. As a man, his opinion will be more pertinent. Therefore, they have more authority and qualifications to judge. These words caused Hu Yan to immediately cover her mouth and chuckle. The Dong Shui is really something. He clearly wants to take advantage of others, yet he still makes the reason sound so dignified. Oh. Could it be that miss who is afraid of letting the young master see your current appearance? As a woman, Xiao Yin had long felt that Hu Yan looked at the young master differently. However, she was already prepared to share the young master with others. Furthermore, with her status, she would be very happy if she could be a bed-warming maid in the future. Naturally, she didn't have the authority to be jealous of others. Chapter 83. Why would I be scared? Let's see then. Hu Yan seemed to be throwing a tantrum as she spoke, but she was probably the only one who knew what she was really thinking. She really wanted to see what kind of expression Yang Qindong would have when he saw her in this white qipao. In the backyard, the 100 young men and women had already switched to walking. A paper bowl was placed on top of each of their heads. In Yang Qindong's words, they had to keep the upper half of their bodies steady while walking. They absolutely couldn't allow their paper bowls to fall. If they did, they would be punished with standing for an extra hour, and no meat for dinner. It wasn't a heavy punishment, but none of the 100 future employees of the immortal abode wanted to be punished. They didn't know if they would be disqualified if they were punished too many times. If that was the case, they would have to return to their old lives. They could only eat 2 meals a day, and they weren't even full. Here, they could eat 3 meals a day, and there was meat for every meal. They had new clothes to wear, and they even had a monthly salary. Originally, Yang Qindong was staring at the crowd and pointing out their mistakes. However, when 3 graceful figures suddenly appeared in his peripheral vision, Yang Qindong was completely unable to remain calm. In his line of sight, the 3 beauties were like fairies descending to the mortal world as they walked towards him one by one. This caused his heartbeat to accelerate, and his face began to heat up. Even his gaze became infatuated. Seeing Yang Qindong's dazed expression, the 3 girls couldn't help but feel amused. In the end, it was Qiao Yin, who was the closest to him, who slowly walked up and whispered into his ear, "Young master, you're almost drooling." "Ah. Oh, oh." Yang Qindong, who had lost his composure, hurriedly raised his hand to wipe his mouth. However, how could he wipe anything? Only then did he realize that Qiao Yin was teasing him. He couldn't help but awkwardly say, "Yin, you're being naughty again." Ha ha ha. When she saw that Yang Qindong really was wiping his mouth, Qiao Yin skipped away with a smile. This scene also caused Yang Duo and Hu Yan to cover their mouths and laugh. "Humph. You actually dare to laugh at this young master? In order to punish you all, someone come and serve me with a brush." Yang Qindong saw that the 3 women were so beautiful, and each of them had an extraordinary temperament. It really felt like 100 flowers were blooming, and he had the idea of painting them as a memento. After Yang Qindong shouted, Tiger's mane had already turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was holding a wooden frame in his hands. That was the so-called easel that the 6th young master had requested. Does Yang Qindong know how to draw? Naturally, the answer was yes. As an outstanding member of the Wolf's Fang External Operations team, drawing was a skill that must be mastered. Among them, he was best at sketching. The so-called easel was prepared according to the standard of sketching. When the easel was placed there, Yang Qindong took out a hard pencil from the warehouse and had Qiao Yin stand in front of him. Then, he began to draw. After a few strokes, a rough outline appeared on the paper. This was the first time Qiao Yin had seen the young master draw. Out of absolute trust, she stood there without moving. On the other hand, Yang Duo and Hu Yan, who had nothing to do for the time being, came up to join in on the fun. When the 2 arrived in front of the easel and looked down, their originally playful expressions immediately turned into incomparable astonishment. With just a few strokes, an undulating and curving line was outlined. After the shape, structure, characteristics, rhythm, and charm were displayed one by one, Qiao Yin seemed to come alive on the paper. What kind of drawing technique is this? Yang Duo and Qiao Yin both had extremely astonished expressions. They were both daughters of noble families and were all descendants of famous families. They understood drawing techniques and were even quite good at it. It was because of this that they were even more astonished by the ability that Yang Qindong displayed. I call it sketching. Yang Qindong raised his head slightly and gave the 2 girls a charming smile. Then, he continued to draw and complete the rest of his work. From start to finish, it took only half the time it took to drink a cup of tea. The sketch was completed and Qiao Yin was vividly engraved on the paper. Yang Qindong stopped and nodded. Not bad. You didn't lose your skill. That's it. Wow. So beautiful. The 2 women saw that the painting had been completed in such a short period of time. Moreover, the painting was so accurate that Qiao Yin's most beautiful side was fully displayed. Aside from the lack of color, everything else that should be displayed was displayed. This caused them to make a fuss over nothing. Yang Qindong had heard a lot of compliments recently, so he didn't have much of a reaction. He just smiled at the 2 and asked, "Which one of you will go first? We can be drawn too." Hu Yan pointed her slender finger at herself in surprise. Originally, she thought that Yang Qindong could draw Qiao Yin so quickly because they understood each other. That was why he could draw so skillfully. However, this was the first time they had met. Of course, if you refuse, I won't force you. Yang Qindong showed a sincere smile again. He didn't want to force people to do things. Ah. I won't refuse. Then, draw me first. When Hu Yan heard that she could also receive such treatment, she was instantly overjoyed. Then, she walked to where Qiao Yin was standing and stood with her chest puffed out. Don't be so stiff. Act more naturally. Yang Qindong chuckled when he saw that Hu Yan's entire body seemed to have been filled with lead, resembling a zombie that had lost a portion of her spiritual energy. Oh. Hu Yan, who was extremely obedient, quickly relaxed her body. It was also at that moment that she heard Yang Qindong's voice. Very good. That's it. Don't move. It'll be done soon. Yang Qindong seemed to have found an excellent angle and began to paint with great vigor. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yang Qindong finished the last stroke and laughed. It's done. He finished drawing just like that. With a trace of suspicion, Hu Yan walked over. However, at this moment, Yang Qindong had already begun to draw for seventh sister, Yang Duo. Hu Yan walked over and looked at the drawing of her face and expression that had been placed to the side. The lines were so beautiful and the curves of her body were so real. It was as if they were lifelike. Her charm, cuteness, and beauty were completely reflected on the paper. At this moment, she felt a little intoxicated. Thinking that the two of them had only met for the first time, how could he understand her so clearly in such a short period of time? Hu Yan couldn't help but look up. She wanted to see the appearance of this man. She wanted to understand him and imprint him deeply in her mind. When she looked up, she saw the scene of Yang Qindong seriously drawing for seventh sister. People say that people who work seriously are the most beautiful because at that time, their whole body is focused and full of charm. When she looked up, she saw this scene. The corners of his mouth slightly curled up, the confident light in his eyes, and the fact that he was able to write as fast as lightning while remaining calm as usual, coupled with his resolute face and bright eyes, all of these attracted Hu Yan. At this moment, she felt as if there was a little rabbit in her arms that was jumping wildly. Done. With a wave of his hand, Yang Qindong, who finished the last stroke, laughed and said that it was done. He put down the hard pencil in his hand. Yang Duo couldn't wait any longer. She ran a few steps and came in front of her portrait. Immediately, she looked like she was in a daze. People say that the person who understands you the most is yourself. But this time, Yang Duo felt that this seemed to be wrong. Because from the painting, she seemed to be seeing herself for the first time. It turned out that she was so beautiful. She wasn't the useless stupid girl that the Wang family said was even worse than a servant girl. Yang Duo stood there in a daze. After a while, tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Yang Qindong's heart softened as he looked at her. He stood up and went forward to hug seventh sister in his arms. The painting is to show your most beautiful side and preserve it for later memories. But what we should do is to cherish the present, cherish our youth, your beauty, and all the good things we have. Seventh sister, if life in the Wang family is not happy, then leave there. Believe in sixth brother, I will let Wang go divorce you. There won't be any bad memories left. It was the most basic common sense to persuade people to reconcile and not to divorce. But now, Yang Qindong was indeed persuading his seventh sister to leave her husband's family. In modern terms, it was divorce. But when Hu Yan and Qiao Yin heard this, they felt that the sixth young master was right. It wasn't abrupt at all, and it wasn't annoying at all. Seventh sister in his arms was clearly moved, but in the end, she clenched her teeth and shook her head. Sixth brother, I still want to try. Can you give me a bit more time? Yes, seventh sister will make the decision. Sixth brother just wants to tell you that no matter when, no matter what decision you make, sixth brother will support you unconditionally. Because in sixth brother's eyes, seventh sister will always be the best and most beautiful girl. As for the others, they can think whatever they want and see whatever they want. Even if Butcher Zhang dies, I won't eat that pig with hair. The originally very warm scene was indeed because of Yang Qindong's last proverb that broke the mood. For a moment, the three women all laughed out loud, and the atmosphere at the scene also became a lot more harmonious because of this sentence. The three girls each held the painting with their own picture in their hands. They loved it so much that if anyone wanted to snatch it from them, there would be a fierce struggle. Next, with the company of the three goddess-like women, Yang Qindong felt that life was extremely comfortable. Even time seemed to pass very quickly. What's wrong? It was already time for lunch. He brought the three girls, who had changed back to their original clothes, to the front of the crop field. The four of them personally plucked several stalks of potatoes, about 40 to 50 caddies. It was the first time the three girls had done something like this. Naturally, they were very happy and couldn't stop smiling. On the other hand, the East faction guards who were in charge of watching over them were very distressed. Chapter 84. Their duty was to guard this place. Without orders from above, no one was allowed to casually approach this place and pick the fruits. However, the orders given by the higher-ups depended on the person involved. For example, Yang Qindong, the discoverer and cultivator, was definitely not an exception. The fields here all belonged to the Yang family, so of course he could do whatever he wanted. As long as it was not a large-scale harvest, even the people of the East faction guards had no right to interfere. Each of the girls carried the freshly dug potatoes and returned to the kitchen with Yang Qindong. Each yower had already prepared everything they needed. Soon, the aroma spread. At noon, the four of them ate until their stomachs were round and full. They were extremely satisfied. You have to learn to share. Good things can't be eaten by yourself. When you leave, each of you bring some for your family to taste. Yang Qindong smiled as he looked at Yang Duo and Hu Yan. Seeing how they looked as if their bellies were about to burst, he couldn't help but stretch out his right hand and lightly scratch the tips of their noses. This was originally Yang Qindong's habitual action. In the past, he often played like this with Qiao Yin. However, this time, he was facing seventh sister Yang Duo and Hu Yan, who he had just met for the first time. Yang Duo was slightly better. She just treated it as her brother joking with her. However, Hu Yan's face immediately flushed red after being scratched. This seemingly habitual action by Yang Qindong was actually very intimate and flirtatious in her eyes. Only after he scratched her nose did Yang Qindong feel that his actions were somewhat inappropriate. However, the matter had already been done. It was too late to apologize. Instead, it would destroy this beautiful atmosphere. He immediately clapped his hands and said, "Sister Chioer, bring a few of the drinks that we prepared beforehand." Each Chioer complied. Then, a few servants carried a few transparent cups and placed them on the table. The cups were transparent glasses from the future. There were a few drinks that had already been prepared. The moment the things were placed on the table, other than Qiao Yin, who had already seen the transparent glass, Hu Yan and Yang Duo were once again shocked by the things in front of them. They realized that as long as they stayed in the Yang manor, there would always be all kinds of surprises waiting for them, and they were all existences that were far beyond their imagination. Don't just stare at the glass. Why don't you try this drink? Yang Qindong smiled as he looked at the shocked duo. You call this a glass? So exquisite, so beautiful. Hu Yan couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes, this is called a glass cup. It's an improved product of colored glass. It's more transparent and gives people a clearer feeling. As Yang Qindong explained, he picked up the glass in front of him and took a sip. Try it. The drinks inside are the real delicacies. I guarantee that none of you have tasted it before. Of course, no one had tasted it before. No matter if it was the apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, milk tea, or fruit tea placed in front of them, none of them had ever seen or heard of them before, let alone tasted them. The three women imitated Yang Qindong and began to taste it. They couldn't stop once they tasted it. In the end, they drank until their bellies were round and full. At this moment, they were a bit regretful. If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have eaten so much at lunch. Now that there was delicious food in front of them, they could only look and not drink. It was too much of a pity. The three women ate and drank their fill. It was already the middle of the afternoon. Only then did they feel that time had passed too quickly. Thinking that they were ready to go home, Yang Duo and Hu Yan's faces revealed expressions of reluctance. Seeing the two's intentions, Yang Qindong said to Yang Duo, "Seventh sister, this is your maiden home. If you don't want to go back, just stay here." This was something that Yang Qindong could only say to Yang Duo, but he couldn't do anything about Hu Yan. If he were to ask her to stay, he would definitely be treated as a lecher. He was afraid that when night fell, Hu Zhangning would kill him with a knife. "Thank you, sixth brother. Seventh sister, I still have to go back. No matter what, I am still a member of the Wang clan." Yang Duo shook her head and rejected Yang Qindong's good intentions. However, from her words, it could be heard that she was somewhat moved by the sixth young master's suggestion. That's right. Instead of wasting her youth and beauty on Wang Go who didn't know how to cherish himself, why not learn to be herself? Were other people's opinions really that important? Knowing that seventh sister wanted to be strong, before she made a decision, she had to do her own part. Yang Qindong couldn't persuade her anymore. However, he was not completely unprepared. He clapped his hands 3 times in the air, and then 10 young girls dressed like maids came in from outside. Looking at the 10 girls walking over, Yang Duo and Hu Yan were stunned. Even Xiao Yin, who didn't understand, looked at Yang Qindong with a puzzled expression. She didn't understand what the young master wanted to do. "The 10 of you, listen up. In the future, my seventh sister, Yang Duo, will be your master. You have to serve her with all your heart. Every month, this young master will give you 2 taels of silver as a monthly allowance. During festivals, your family will also receive some rice, noodles, and meat. In short, you will not be treated unfairly. However, if I hear that seventh sister has suffered any grievances in the Wang family in the future, then each and every one of you will be punished. Do you understand?" After the 10 people stood in place, Yang Qindong's cold voice suddenly rang out. Yang Qindong, who was like a completely different person from before, unconsciously emitted the aura of a superior person, causing Hu Yan, who was watching from the side, to be a little dazed. How could this person change so quickly? Just now, he was like the sun hanging high in the sky, which could melt people. At this moment, he was like the cold wind of winter, making people feel a chill go straight to the bottom of their hearts. "We understand." The 10 girls all bowed and replied in unison. Only then did the chill on Yang Qindong's body disappear. He then looked at the stunned Yang Duo and said, "Seventh sister, this is what sixth brother prepared for you. They will be by your side in the future. If you need anything, just call them. Sixth brother will settle all the expenses with them. Don't worry." With Yang Qindong's current financial resources, how many people couldn't be supported by him? It was just giving seventh sister 10 maids, it wasn't worth mentioning. As for Yang Duo, when she saw the 10 maids, she couldn't help but cry. When she married into the Wang family, there was a maid by her side. Unfortunately, after a serious illness, the maid couldn't survive and died. Only she was left alone. When she was bullied, she could only silently endure it in her heart. Ever since sixth brother appeared, everything had changed. The Wang family no longer dared to scold and beat her like before. Not only that, there were now 10 more maids. This was equivalent to raising her status all of a sudden. As such, she no longer had to worry about others giving her a hard time. This time, she truly felt the warmth of a family. "Sixth brother, thank you." She stretched out her hand and tightly patted Yang Qindong's big hand. "Ha, Seventh sister, you are my biological sister. Doing anything for you is what I should do. Oh right, when you leave in the future, bring some things back. With these 10 maids, 1,000 taels a month won't be enough. I'll give you double. 2,000 taels shouldn't be a problem. When the time comes, don't have the money to reward them. That would be too embarrassing. Also, prepare some food and clothes. If you are in a bad mood, don't eat with the Yang family and just cook for yourself. But there is one thing, you must not tell the other sisters. Otherwise, they will say that sixth brother favors one and discriminates against the other. When he said the last sentence, Yang Qindong had a bitter expression, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Yang Duo, who was originally very touched, was about to cry again. However, when she heard that she couldn't tell the other older sisters, she immediately pursed her lips and smiled. At that moment, she really looked back and smiled charmingly, making the 6 palaces pale in comparison. However, after laughing, Yang Duo still shook her head. You'll be paying for these maids' expenses. Seventh sister, why would I need so much money? 1,000 taels a month is more than enough to spend. Yang Duo wanted to refuse, but unexpectedly, Xiao Yin spoke up. Seventh young lady, this is a small token of appreciation from the young master. You should accept it. Xiao Yin's identity was only Yang Qindong's personal maid. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to speak up in this kind of situation. But everyone could see that the 6th young master's attitude towards her was very unusual. If things didn't go well, she might become a concubine in the future. This was equivalent to marrying into the Yang family and becoming half a Yang family member. Who would look down on her then? Right, right. Seventh sister only needs to accept this from 6th brother. Save up the excess and use it as a dowry in the future. Yang Qindong chuckled. But when he said this, Yang Duo's face turned even redder. She even buried her head deeply. After dealing with Yang Duo's matter, Yang Qindong looked at Hu Yan. Miss Hu, thank you for accompanying my 7th sister this time to relax. In order to express my gratitude, I have prepared some things. I'll have to trouble you to bring them along when you leave. Yang Qindong didn't say what it was and Hu Yan was smart enough not to ask. It was as if everything was in tacit agreement. An hour later, the 3 carriages slowly left the gates of the Yang village. There were 2 more carriages than when they came. Not only that, there were 5 maids standing beside each carriage. These were all going to follow Yang Duo back to the Wang family. It could be imagined that when these people arrived at the Wang family, Wang Go, and that unreasonable mother, Lady Yan, would be shocked. Not to mention how Yang Duo was after returning to the Wang family. After Hu Yan entered the city, she separated from Yang Duo. Behind the carriage she was in, there was another carriage following. The coachman was Yang Lu. This carriage was a gift from Yang Qindong to Hu Yan. He said it was to thank her for bringing 7th sister out to relax. But as for the real reason, only the 2 of them knew. Chapter 85. Hu Yan, who was sitting in the carriage, had a look of joy on her face. She even thought shyly that this wouldn't be the engagement gift from Dong Shuai, right? But she just didn't know what was inside. Was there the toilet paper that she promised her father? She was excited and worried all the way. When she arrived at the gate of the Hu mansion, Lieutenant Gao, who followed her, immediately asked the gatekeeper to find someone to unload the things. After the bags were unloaded, Yang Lu drove the carriage back, leaving behind Hu Zhangning, who had heard the news and rushed over with a look of surprise. Yan, what are these things? Don't tell me it's all toilet paper. Hu Zhangning asked in confusion. Father can see for himself. Daughter is tired and wants to go back to rest. She was holding a small package, which contained her white cheongsam and the sketch. In her opinion, these were the most important things. But after answering this sentence, Hu Yan didn't care what Yang Qindong gave her. She turned and left, leaving Hu Zhangning with a puzzled look. He had to let people carry the things into the courtyard first, and then look at them one by one. Needless to say, there must be toilet paper in the gift, and there was a lot of it. In the morning, the housekeeper of the Hu mansion and the housekeepers of the other ministers went to Yang village to ask for toilet paper, but to no avail. Then Hu Yan appeared. Presumably, they were more or less related, so this thing naturally couldn't be left out. Not only that, but there were also other good things sent, such as toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, cosmetics, and so on. There were also food, such as freshly dug potatoes and boxes of canned fish. There were all kinds of flavors in the canned fish. With the geographical location of Qiqian City, fishing was not a problem at all. As long as this thing was sealed well and the taste was unique, there would naturally be no problems. The things were opened one by one, and Hu Zhangning sighed. This Yang Shima was really generous. Of course, what made him the happiest was that these were all obtained by Hu Yan. Did that mean that this kid also took a fancy to his daughter? Whether it was a match in terms of social status or talent, it seemed that the marriage between the two families was more suitable. 100 Flowers Hall. Yesterday, after the two songs were played, the reputation of this place went up a notch. Tonight, there were even more people coming, which made the head procuress, Mu Lily, smile all night long. It was a pity that there were too few tables in 100 Flowers Hall, and the place was not big enough. Otherwise, she would be able to earn more money. Just like before, the moment the two songs were played, everyone on the stage cheered. At the same time, voices urging them to stay rose and fell, as if they wanted to flip the roof of 100 Flowers Hall over. However, Madame Xue paid no attention to this and continued to walk down the platform. There were a total of 2 new songs. If she sang them over and over again, she was afraid that sooner or later, she would get tired of listening to them. This was not what she wanted. Madame Xue walked down the platform. Many people in the crowd disagreed with her. They all shouted to express their dissatisfaction. However, among the crowd, there was a man dressed in a brocade robe. He had a pointy mouth and cheeks that resembled a monkey's cheeks. Instead, he used all of his strength to raise his hands and flip the table in front of him to the ground. Following that, he shouted, "This general didn't allow you to leave. You can try to leave." The big movement of the table being flipped naturally attracted countless people's attention. For a moment, the hall became quiet. Even Madame Xue, who was about to leave, could not help but stop and look back. It was precisely this glance that caused him to be filled with terror. She knew that man. It was Shi Sheng, the Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard. When it came to Shi Sheng, not many people knew of him. However, when it came to his elder brother, very few people didn't know of him. He was the eunuch Shi Ning, the eunuch who betrayed the great Ming dynasty and was executed by 1,000 cuts. However, the change of the Tumu castle had not happened yet. Naturally, Shi Ning was still in power and was even favored by the emperor. He also had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, the chief steward of the ceremony directorate. With such a powerful elder brother, Shi Sheng naturally did things without scruples. In addition, he was a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard, which made him even more domineering. Just last year, he bullied Zhang Fu, the Duke of Qing, who had been a senior official for several dynasties and made outstanding contributions to the army. Zhang Fu did not dare to say anything and had a lot of land taken away from him. Today, he was here and flipped the table. How could the others not be shocked when they saw him? Especially Zhang De, the second son of Zhang Fu, who was in the crowd. Although his eyes were full of hatred, he did not have the courage to intervene in this matter. Even Duke Ying's son did not dare to intervene. Seeing this, the others could only endure and did not dare to say a word. Shi Sheng seemed to be very satisfied with the way people looked at him. He laughed and pointed at Madame Xue, saying, "I haven't heard enough. Sing one more time." As an entertainer, Madame Xue had seen many things like this. However, she still felt nervous. She felt that Shi Sheng did not come just to listen to the song. He probably had other purposes. Since he was not as powerful, he had to obey. Seeing Xi Xing's domineering and arrogant attitude, Madame Xue knew that she could not avoid it today. She had to force a smile and bow to him. Then she turned to the stage. The procuress, Mu Lily, immediately arranged for someone to prepare a new table and send it to Xi Xing. Xi Xing then crossed his legs and raised his head, looking insufferably arrogant as he continued to listen to Madame Xue's song. Your Excellency, Madame Xue's skin is really good. If I can hug her for one night, my life will not be in vain. The subordinate beside him flattered and looked at Madame Xue on the stage, drooling. It's not difficult. I have to be on duty tonight. Forget it. Tomorrow is my day off. I'll come here to have fun for one night. By the way, check the person behind Baihua Hall. Tell him that I like this place and want to buy it. Xi Xing said indifferently. Even Du Qing had been bullied by him. She was just an insignificant entertainer. How could she jump to the top? Yes, Your Excellency. I'll do it right away. The servant answered and turned to leave. A pimp who was serving tea to a guest at a nearby table had his ears pricked up. When he heard these words, he immediately revealed a look of fear. However, he quickly pretended to be calm. After thinking for a while, he went backstage. There was a limit to what a pimp could do. The benefits he could get from the kind of place he worked for were proportional. Baihua Hall's business was very good now, and they usually received a lot of rewards. However, if Madame Xue was replaced, they would get less money if something happened to her. They might not even be able to continue their business. For his own sake, he had to tell the procuress, Mu Lily, about this. Backstage, Mu Lily was looking at the stage with a worried expression. She was worried that something would happen later. As the big sister of the 100 Flowers Hall's procuress, she naturally knew what kind of person Xi Xing was and what kind of morals he had. Miss Mu. The pimp came to Mu Lily's side and whispered in her ear what he had just heard. Then, Mu Lily's expression turned into one of shock. Her originally pretty face turned pale at this moment. What should we do? Under Xi Xing's threat, Madame Xue had to sing the two songs again. Fortunately, there were no more heckling. Xi Xing walked out of Baihua Hall accompanied by several of his men. Everything seemed to be fine after the storm. Only Mu Lily, who had heard the news, knew that it was not that Xi Xing wanted to stop, but that he had regarded Baihua Hall as his property. That was why he did not make trouble. Madame Xue went backstage, exhaled a long breath of fragrance, and wiped her forehead gently. When she saw Mu Lily coming from afar, she forced a smile and said, "Sister, I'm fine." Well, it's not fine this time. It's serious. Mu Lily sighed and told Xiao Yuxue what she had just heard from the pimp. What? Sure enough, Madame Xue, who had heard the news, didn't look any better than Mu Lily did just now. Well. Sister, do you think our boss can sell Baihua Hall to Xi Xing? If it's someone else, I don't know. But who is Xi Xing? Last year, he even dared to occupy Duke Ying's fertile land, and nothing happened. I heard that the emperor punished them later, but now they have regained their prestige, haven't they? She did not say whether it was possible or not, but the comparison between Duke Ying and Madame Xue had proved her idea. What should we do? What should we do? Madame Xue was really anxious at this moment. She had thought that she could make more money as a young actress and a top courtesan. In this way, even if she was old and could not sing anymore, she would have enough money to spend the rest of her life. She could even find a good man to marry as long as she kept her chastity. But all of this seemed to have become a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Once 100 Flowers Hall became Xi Xing's property, with the other party's character, he would probably eat her up that very night. Then, she would become a money-making tool. Once she grew old, she would probably become useless. Madame Xue shook her head desperately at the thought of all her efforts over the years. Her face was full of unwillingness. Yuxue, I don't want to do this. Is this our fate? We can't change it. Didn't you see that when Xing stood out, no one dared to say anything? This is the general trend. We can't change it. Mu Lily hugged Madame Shui and cried bitterly together. Chapter 86. No. There must be a way. There must be a way. Lady Snow shook her head, unwilling to accept such a fate. She had just learned 2 new songs from Dong Shui, and the whole capital knew about her. Seeing that everything was going well, she was unwilling to let her dream end before it even began. Yes, Dong Shui. For some reason, Yang Qindong's handsome and confident face flashed through Lady Snow's mind. The capital in the 9th month was not as hot as it was during the day at night, and when the cold wind blew, one would feel a chill. Outside the Yang village, Yang Qindong had washed up and was about to go to bed. At this time, Tiger's Mane's voice came from outside. Young master, Lady Snow wants to see you. What is she doing here so late at night? Hearing that Lady Snow was here, he looked at the time. The curfew should have started in the capital. It would be very difficult for Lady Snow to return to 100 Flowers Hall at this time. While Yang Qindong was still thinking about what could make a girl come to him so late at night, Tiger's Mane's voice sounded again. Young master, do you need me to wake Qiao Yin up and ask her to come? No need. Yang Qindong waved his hand. He had arranged for Qiao Yin to go to bed first. In his own words, women were made of water. If they wanted good skin, they needed good sleep. It was precisely this sentence that caused this habit to become a natural one. Unless there was something special, Qiao Yin would go to bed early. Right now, Qiao Yin was probably already asleep. Without knowing what the other party wanted, it wouldn't be appropriate to rashly wake Qiao Yin up. Forget it. Bring her to the study. Yang Qindong thought for a while, put on his coat, and then strolled toward the study. When Tiger's Mane took Lady Snow to the study, Yang Qindong was writing something with his head down. If someone was there, they would know that he was writing a classic play, The Legend of the White Snake, which was later made into a TV series and remade several times. It was also called The New Legend of the White Snake. Madame Snow was brought in. She was wrapped in a long robe, but she was wearing a pair of embroidered shoes that were convenient for walking on the platform. It could be seen that she had come out in a hurry. Is something the matter? She slowly raised her head and looked at Madame Shui from head to toe. She sighed that no matter what she dressed up, she could always attract men's attention. Madame Shui, who had been afraid and anxious, calmed down a lot after Yang Qindong looked at her. She didn't know why. But when she thought of the problems that 100 Flowers Hall might face, she knelt on the ground with a plop. Dong Shui, save me. Please save Lady Shui. If there's anything, get up and talk. Yang Qindong put down the writing brush in his hand and looked at Madame Snow. What's the matter? Tell me in detail. Madame Snow lowered her head and cried. She was really pitiful. While crying softly, she told him what had happened in 100 Flowers Hall in the evening. She also told him what the pimp had overheard and what Mu Lily had said to her. Xing. When Yang Qindong heard the name, he felt it was familiar. But he had only been in the capital for a few days. How could he know everyone? In particular, Xing was just a Qianhu of the Brocade Guard, a nobody in his eyes. Seeing Yang Qindong's confusion, Tiger's Mane, who was standing next to him, quickly took out a book. After searching for a while, he found Xing's name. He handed the book to Yang Qindong. Young master, please take a look. He took the book and saw Xing's name. The investigation of the Security Bureau was written on it. Humph. What the hell? When Yang Qindong saw that Xing had a brother named Ning, he remembered this person. Ning was a famous trader in history. Because of him, the capital was almost captured. Seriously speaking, if Yu Qian hadn't stood up for him, the whole capital would have fallen because of him. At that time, the history of the Great Ming dynasty would have been rewritten. When Yang Qindong got angry, Tiger's mane naturally emitted a murderous aura. "Young master, do you need me to go to the city now to find this person?" And then, Madame Snow knelt in front of him. Obviously, she couldn't see Tiger's mane's beheading gesture. But Yang Qindong saw it clearly. "No, it's not necessary. At this time, you still have to go to the city. However, I'm afraid that you'll still have to make a trip into the city. Do you know who the current owner of 100 Flowers Hall is?" "Young master, it's Fan Ling. He was the vice director of the Ministry of War, a secondary class level 5 official. His father used to be the minister of Honglu Temple." As expected of the director of the Security Bureau, Tiger Shine, who had slowly gotten into his role, quickly reported the other party's identity. Of course, all this had a close relationship with 100 Flowers Hall that Yang Qindong had paid attention to. Find him and buy Madame Snow's slave contract. Yang Qindong made a decision after a short hesitation. It was not the right time to have a direct conflict with a villain like Shi Sheng. At least, he couldn't look for trouble. There was only one way to solve the problem, which was to buy Madame Snow. In this way, even if Shi Sheng got 100 Flowers Hall, he would only get an empty shell. Yes. Tiger's mane immediately understood the meaning of the sixth young master. He answered and turned to leave. "Wait." Madame Snow suddenly said. She came to Yang Qindong for help, but it was just an impulsive act. She didn't have any hope. Dong Shuai was powerful, but he was only talented. Compared to power, he was much weaker. She didn't think that the sixth young master could do anything to Shi Sheng, who even Du Qing, a hero of the great Ming dynasty, couldn't afford to offend. However, she never thought that Yang Qindong would agree to her request so easily. Moreover, he even wanted to buy her slave contract directly. Amidst his excitement, he thought of his elder sister, Mu Lily. If he left and his elder sister did not, he could imagine how Shi Sheng would treat him. It would be a fate worse than death. There was also her maid Xiao Wei. She had been using her for so many years, so she couldn't give her up. At this time, Madame Snow didn't realize that she came to ask for help. She didn't have such awareness. She just thought about how to take her family members to her side, so she shouted, "Wait. Is there anything else?" Yang Qindong looked at Madame Snow with a puzzled expression. Did she still want to stay in 100 Flowers Hall? If so, it would be more difficult to help her. "Yes, please understand, Dong Shuai. This servant still has my elder sister Mu Lily and the maid Xiao Wei are in 100 Flowers Hall. If this servant leaves alone," Yang Qindong understood that this was a loyal and affectionate Madame Snow. He liked this kind of person. He immediately said to Tiger's mane, who was still standing there, "Did you hear that? There are 3 people in total. Buy their slave contracts. Don't be afraid to spend money. Go." "Yes." Tiger's mane answered and turned to leave. As for how to enter the city in the middle of the night, it was not a problem for Yang Qindong, the number 1 master beside him. The matter was solved. Although she didn't see the answer, Madame Snow couldn't help but trust Yang Qindong. Especially at this time, the confidence he showed made her feel infatuated. Only the 2 of them were left in the room. Suddenly, there was a very awkward and ambiguous atmosphere in the study. Yang Qindong was the first to feel the difference. At this time, he regretted that he didn't let Tiger's mane take Madame Snow to rest first, so he wanted to call for help. He knew that even if Tiger's mane wasn't here for the time being, Beta Persei, Yang Si and the others would be outside. It could be said that whenever he needed, they would appear at any time. But for some reason, Yang Qindong didn't want to let anyone take Madame Snow away. In this very contradictory mood, he looked at Madame Snow and said unconsciously, "Well, I'll arrange for someone to take you to rest." This was obviously not an order, but a tone of negotiation. Madame Snow was delighted, but she quickly shook her head. "No. I'm not sleepy now." "What are you writing, Dong Shuai?" After saying this, Madame Snow stood up and walked to Yang Qindong leisurely. Faced with Madame Snow's approach, Yang Qindong, who could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, could clearly feel his heart beating faster at this moment. In order to ease the awkwardness, he casually said, "I'm writing a story about love." Really? Dong Shuai's literary talent has long been known in the capital. I wonder if I have the luck to read it first. It seemed that she was asking, but when she finished speaking, she had taken the initiative to walk to Yang Qindong's side and bent down. Because the temperature in the study was suitable, Madame Snow had already taken off her coat and robe. At this time, she was wearing a wide-collared top. When she lowered her head, Yang Qindong saw a touch of Snow White looming in front of him. Some things couldn't be ignored just because you didn't want to. On the contrary, some things you said you didn't want to think about, but you couldn't help thinking about it in your heart. At this time, Yang Qindong was obviously the latter. His eyes followed the touch of Snow White and seemed to see two tall mountains. Madame Snow's skin was very white. Among all the women he knew, only Hu Yan could be compared with her. As the saying went, 100 ugliness could cover up 100 ugliness, not to mention that Madame Snow was a first-class beauty. Against the dim light of the oil lamp in the study, she really made people feel that they were looking at a beauty under the lamp. The more they looked at her, the more attracted they were. Madame Snow seemed to be looking down at Yang Qindong's manuscript, but in fact, she had been paying attention to his changes. Although she was a performer and not a prostitute, she had heard and seen a lot of things in the red light district, so she naturally knew how to interact with men. Chapter 87. At this moment, Madame Shui felt that the man beside her began to breathe heavily. His unique breath made Madame Shui's heart beat rapidly. He was handsome, talented, capable, domineering, confident, and had a good family background. When these advantages were concentrated on one person, it would naturally make him shine with incomparable brilliance. Not to mention that Yang Qindong was a hero who had just saved a beauty. Madame Shui was already in love with him. It was undoubtedly very important for her to find a man she could entrust her life to. Now, the man was right in front of her. What should she do? What would he do? Whether it was to repay the kindness or to repay the professor's kindness, should she devote herself to him? Or should she give herself to him? Both of them had pure bodies. In this kind of atmosphere, neither of them took the initiative to speak. Neither of them had the intention to break the ice. However, both of them were well aware of each other's thoughts. For a moment, this kind of feeling was indescribable, but it was indeed extremely wonderful. Madame Shui remained motionless. She had been bending over for half a cup of tea's time, waiting for Yang Qindong to do something. She heard from the other sisters that at this time, shouldn't the man be more active? But why didn't Dong Shui do anything? Yang Qindong was indeed hesitating. Logically speaking, he should have carried her in a domineering manner. His bedroom was not far away from the study, and then everything would have gone smoothly. There was even a voice in his heart urging him to do so, and even his body was supporting such a thought. However, Yang Qindong did not do so. Perhaps it was because of his conservative thinking. He thought that if he had sex with Madame Shui, it would be more or less taking advantage of her. He did not want to do so. He preferred success to come naturally. However, Yang Qindong also knew that if he persisted in this atmosphere, he was afraid that he would not be able to control his heart. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and said, "Madame Shui, it's a little late. I should go to bed." "Really? It just so happens that Shui is also sleepy. Why don't you let me warm Dong Shui's bed?" Madame Shui was overjoyed. She thought that Yang Qindong said it on purpose for her to hear. How could she not take advantage of the situation and go downhill like a donkey? Originally, he wanted to find an excuse to separate them so that he could calm down. He never thought that it would lead to such a result. If he said no at this time, it would be too hurtful. Yang Qindong helplessly nodded and said, "All right then." The two of them walked out of the study one after the other and went to the bedroom. A figure slowly retreated from the darkness. Even if he wanted to protect the sixth young master, he still had to consider the situation. Sometimes, if he still wanted to exist, then it would not be protection, but rather, it would be a nuisance. Yang Qindong sensed that the eyes that were secretly watching him had left. He knew that from now on, only Madame Shui and himself were left. He could not help but feel a little restless. Should he really do something? Or is my manhood coming to an end tonight? Dong Shui, I'll go in first. While Yang Qindong was still thinking about what to do next, Madame Shui had taken off her clothes and then plunged into the quilt. At that moment, Yang Qindong caught a glimpse of her snow-white body. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Yang Qindong involuntarily got up and walked slowly to the bed. Yang Qindong's heart was beating faster and faster. Madame Shui, who had already slipped into the quilt, was also heartbeat faster. She even blushed from her face to her neck. Then she slowly closed her eyes, but her long eyelashes were still trembling, indicating that she was not asleep and had no intention of falling asleep. Yang Qindong finally finished walking a few steps. He involuntarily stretched out his arm. When he was about to touch the snow-white body that was bowing her head and even trembling, he forced himself to say, "Madame Shui, I'm not used to being warmed by someone, oh." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a snow-white arm emerge from the blanket and wrap around his neck. A strong force assaulted him, causing Yang Qindong to uncontrollably burrow into the blanket along with his clothes. At the same time, a pair of gentle jade lips lightly touched Yang Qindong's lips, causing him to be unable to spit out a single word. The sweet liquid stirred in her mouth. Madame Shui, who was a little clumsy, tried her best to release the strength and courage of her first kiss. Yang Qindong cooperated with her. At first, he was passive, but soon he took the initiative. It seemed that the kiss could not satisfy him, so he turned around and pressed himself on her. Then he stared into Madame Shui's beautiful eyes and said, "Do you know that I'm in a wolf's den? How dare you take the initiative to provoke me? Have you thought about the consequences?" "No, and there's no need to think about it. It's my fortune to give myself to Dong Shui," Madame Shui said, panting. She seemed to have drained all her strength just now. At this moment, she did not know what to do except wait passively. Madame Shui's words made Yang Qindong's hormones rise. Since he was not afraid of a woman, what was there to be afraid of? If he abandoned her at this time, he would not be a beast, but worse than a beast, just like the stories said. Yang Qindong made up his mind. He felt that his body had reached its limit, so he decided to release it. He slowly lowered his head and moved closer and closer to Madame Snow. When Yang Qindong thought that it was a matter of course, he suddenly noticed a drop of tear from the corner of Madame Shui's eye. It was this tear that cooled down Yang Qindong's burning body in an instant. What was he doing? Madame Shui came to him because she was bullied, but he wanted to sleep with her. In this way, what was the difference between him and Shi Sheng, who wanted to bully her? Even if they were congenial, it couldn't be now. Otherwise, there would inevitably be a knot in his heart, which might accompany him for the rest of his life. "Well, we're both tired today. You can rest here. I'll go to another room." Finally, Yang Qindong resisted the impulse and said such a manly sentence, at least he thought so. Then he got up and was about to leave. But the same arm stretched out across the air. "Dong Shui, forgive me, okay? I really haven't thought it through. I'm still worried about Sister Mu and Wei, I understand. Go to sleep. When you wake up tomorrow, you can pretend that nothing happened." Yang Qindong sighed. Madame Shui had something on her mind. Fortunately, he didn't sleep with her at this time. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. "No." Seeing that Yang Qindong was about to leave, Madame Shui was unwilling to let him go. She was just not ready, and she was worried about Mu Lily and Wei, That was why she couldn't devote herself to him. But in the end, she really didn't hate Yang Qindong. She even liked him. It was just that today was not the right time. But she couldn't give her all, and she couldn't let the sixth young master leave. Otherwise, who knew whether this man would be angry or not? If so, she was afraid that she couldn't find a way to make up for it. I'm scared. I'm willing to ask Dong Shuai to stay with me. Can you hold me and sleep until dawn? He could only hold her but couldn't do anything. If it were other men, they wouldn't agree. Weren't you testing me? But Yang Qindong unexpectedly agreed. Maybe he really had a good impression of Madame Shui, or maybe he also wanted to feel what it was like to sleep with a beauty in his arms. Of course, there was another possibility. The sixth young master was really sleepy. Don't scold the prodigal. No matter what the reason was, Yang Qindong fell asleep with Madame Shui, who was only wearing a dudu. During this time, their heads were very close, but in the end, they really didn't do anything. They even had sweet and quiet smiles on their faces. Early the next morning, after Qiao Yin got up, she first took a look at the courtyard. She didn't see the sixth young master, who was exercising. She couldn't help but be very curious, so she went to the bedroom. Here, although Beta Persei was guarding, he didn't stop Qiao Yin when he saw her coming. He just turned a blind eye, but his ears were already pricked up, as if he knew what was going to happen next. Sure enough, just 3 seconds after Qiao Yin entered the sixth young master's bedroom, there was a scream. Following that, Qiao Yin staggered out of the bedroom, her face pale and powerless. After that, she leaned against the door and covered her face and cried. This scene fell into the eyes of Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, and he quickly closed his eyes. As a close guard, who didn't know Qiao Yin's feelings for the young master? But now, another woman had taken the lead, so it was reasonable for her to be sad. Not long after Beta Persei closed his eyes, Yang Qindong, who had changed his clothes, appeared in front of the door. He reached out and helped the tearful Qiao Yin up, then whispered something in her ear. In an instant, the rain turned into sunshine, and Qiao Yin's face turned into a smile. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong laughed after seeing this, then shouted to the dark, "What are you looking at? Why aren't you running with the young master?" Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, didn't know what kind of trick the young master was playing, but when he heard the order, he appeared in a flash and followed Yang Qindong. This caused Qiao Yin to be very happy, as if she had made a big mistake. The two of them went out of the courtyard, one after the other, and went straight to the backyard's playground. Leaving behind Qiao Yin, who had already changed into a smile, he turned around and entered the house. Then, his laughter echoed throughout the bedroom. Chapter 88. Qiao Yin was very happy because the young master had told her that he had only comforted Mama Shui. Although he liked Mama Shui as much as he liked her, he did not want her. If you don't believe me, you can go into the house and check. You can even ask Mama Shui to dance as a test. If she had really lost her real body last night, how could she have the energy to dance? Her body probably wouldn't allow it. Because of this, Qiao Yin easily believed Yang Qindong. She even thought that if the young master needed anything, he would definitely look for her first. After all, they had been in a relationship for many years. Yes, that must be it. After the backyard was settled, Yang Qindong seemed to be much lighter when he started running. Beta Persei, who was following behind him, was very curious. How could he still be so energetic after a tiring night? Of course, Yang Qindong didn't need to explain this to him. After returning from the 5-kilometer run, Qiao Yin had already prepared the bath water, but this time there was an extra helper by her side, Mama Shui. After the bath, the three of them had a peaceful and pleasant breakfast together. Tiger's mane appeared again, and not only that, but also the charming Mu Lily and the maid Little Wire followed behind him. Sister Mu, Little Wire. The three women were very excited to see each other. Tiger's mane stepped forward and said, "Young master, it's all done. These are the 3 slave contracts." As he spoke, he placed 3 pieces of paper with official seals and handprints in front of Yang Qindong. Well, you've worked hard. Go and rest. Yang Qindong waved his hand. Originally, he could directly burn these 3 slave contracts, but in this way, the 3 of them would not be able to get rid of their lowly status for the rest of their lives. Greetings, Dong Shuai. After the 3 women met, they all knelt in front of Yang Qindong with grateful expressions. Get up, all of you. From now on, you have to abide by the rules here. Don't kneel if you don't need to. Yang Qindong said helplessly. He really didn't like this etiquette of kneeling when meeting people. Unfortunately, everyone seemed to be willing to play this game. For example, Tiger's Mane and the others beside him, he didn't know how many times he had said it, but it still didn't work at all. They still knelt when meeting people. Xie Dongshui. Whether or not the 3 girls would kneel in the future, no one knew, but their thanks were very sincere. Alright, since you've left 100 Flower Hall, you're now part of my Yang family. I don't keep idle people here. This is a new story I've written. You can think of how to act it out together. These are the manuscripts. You can study them yourselves. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. She took out the script of The Legend of White Snake that she had prepared a long time ago. There was a very clear plan for the distribution of roles. With this, she could play the roles of Lady Snow and Mu Lily, the former top courtesan. Did they know that this was a job for them? The 3 girls hurriedly agreed, then took the manuscripts and went to the backyard. When only Qiao Yin was left, she walked up softly. Young master, although they've left 100 Flower Hall, they're still lowly, young master knows. I'll find a way to change their names. Yang Qindong rubbed his head as he spoke. Changing their names was easy to say, but difficult to do. Especially when they were targeted by Shi Sheng. If he found out that someone had changed Lady Snow and the others' names, he would definitely come looking for trouble. How could he solve this problem? Young master, there's a eunuch called Mao Mu outside the manor. He said that he's an old friend of yours. Just as Yang Qindong was thinking about how to do this at the lowest cost, Beta Persei appeared and reported Mao Mu's visit. Oh. It's him. Ha, someone sent me a pillow when I was sleepy. Please. After hearing who it was, Yang Qindong's face was full of smiles. Is it a eunuch? Does young master want him to do this? But Shi Sheng's brother is also a eunuch. Qiao Yin was very smart. Looking at the young master's expression, she knew what he was thinking, but she still reminded him with some worry. It's okay. The relationship between eunuchs is not that united. Young master knows. Yang Qindong said confidently. As the saying goes, evil people need evil people to deal with evil people. Originally, he thought about whether he should use some kind of thunderous method to make Shi Sheng disappear, but he didn't expect Mao Mu to come at this time. That was the best thing that could happen. In the study, Yang Qindong gave Mao Mu a very high level of courtesy and met him here. Being able to meet in the study meant that the 2 sides had a close relationship. Mao Mu, who was very familiar with this, was very excited. Although the eunuch group was very powerful now, there was Wang Zhen and his henchmen above them. In addition, there was another force, Jining, and a few other small forces. He was just one of them who was not famous. Yang Qindong was now in the limelight. Even Chief Steward Wang Zhen had to look up to him. Logically speaking, this person did not have to treat him like this at all. It would be understandable if he just sent someone to talk to him. However, at this time, he was meeting him in a private place like the study. The meaning of this was already obvious. Lord Yang. As soon as the 2 sides met, Mao Mu cupped his fists and looked very respectful. Eunuch Mao, you don't have to be like this. We are considered old friends. In the future, you can call me the 6th young master, or Dong Shuai to others. Yang Qindong's face was full of smiles. He looked like an old friend as he spoke. Good, Dong Shuai is a good name. If possible, I will call you Lord Yang, Dong Shuai from now on. Mao Mu's ability to follow the flow was not low. When he saw Yang Qindong being so polite, he immediately agreed. Ha, good. Since you are an old friend, I will definitely not treat you unfairly. Men, bring the things here. Yang Qindong laughed loudly, as if he was very satisfied with Mao Mu's attitude. Then, two people walked in from outside the study. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei carried a heavy wooden box and placed it in the center of the study. You can leave. Yang Qindong said casually, then gave Mao Mu a look that said, you know what I mean. This is. Mao Mu was very curious. After getting Yang Qindong's permission, he stood up from the chair, walked to the wooden box, and reached out to open it. There was a flash of white light. It turned out to be a box of silver ingots. Looking at the quantity, there were at least 5,000 silver ingots. This is. Mao Mu was indeed a little dizzy from the silver ingots, but he was even more surprised. He did not understand why Dong Shuai would think so highly of him. He originally came here to ask for a favor, but before he could even open his mouth, the other party had already given him benefits. This made him unable to speak his next words. Seeing the surprise in Mao Mu's eyes, as well as the trace of greed in them, Yang Qindong laughed loudly and said, Eunuch Mao, I said that since we are good friends, there is no reason for us not to be friends. I am just giving Eunuch Mao these. I hope that Eunuch Mao can rise to the top. This way, as a good friend, I can also bask in the glory. His words were clear. This was to make use of each other. However, with your current status and identity, Mao Mu, it is far from enough. Therefore, I support you and support you to have more power. In the future, we can all be on equal footing and do great things together, right? In the face of Yang Qindong's initiative to show goodwill, Mao Mu had no reason to reject it. He had always believed that he had the ability. What he lacked was only the opportunity and enough foundation. What was the foundation? That was to have enough background for him to use. In the palace, scheming were the most important, but money was equally important. If you don't have money, there won't be anyone willing to risk their lives for you. Naturally, it will be difficult for you to do anything. Now, Yang Qindong took out more than 5,000 silver ingots. For the current Mao Mu, this was not a small amount of wealth. With this, he could rope in more people in the palace for his use. He did not dare to say that he could do great things, but it was not a problem for him to do some small things in private. As for the other need, which was the so-called opportunity, with Yang Qindong, he could use this opportunity to become the link between Dong Shuai and Director Wang Zhen. After all, there were some small matters that the two of them couldn't possibly talk about in person. In that case, his role in this matter would increase, and at the same time, it would also expose the fact that he met Chief Steward Wang Zhen frequently. This was an opportunity. Seeing that Yang Qindong could make up for what he lacked, Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master. At this moment, when Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master, he felt like he was looking at his biological parents. Dong Shuai. With a plop, Mao Mu knelt down in front of Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's eyes lit up. This person's ability to judge the situation was not bad. He knew when to lower his head. Feeling that he had found the right person, he was satisfied. He pretended to be panicked and asked, Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? However, Yang Qindong was only talking and did not have the intention to help him up. Seeing this, Mao Mu knew that he had to express his attitude. Since he had already knelt down, what was the point of saying some words to show his loyalty? Dong Shuai, this old servant is grateful for your appreciation. In the future, if there's anything you need, feel free to say it. Blade Mountain Flame Sea Guild only needs a word from Dong Shuai, and this old servant will do his best to accomplish it. His face was full of sincerity. Replacing this old servant with this old servant was already a way to express his loyalty. Until now, Yang Qindong was satisfied and bent down to support Mao Mu. Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? I said that we are friends. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Taking the opportunity to stand up, Mao Mu knew that he had passed the first test. From now on, he was Dong Shuai's man, sharing honor and disgrace. After becoming friends, there were naturally some things that were less roundabout. Mao Mu talked about the matter of diapers. He used himself as a witness to prove the importance of this thing to eunuchs. This time, he wanted to get some more so that he could use them for himself, offer them to steward Wang Zhen, and sell some for money. Chapter 89. That's not a problem. I can naturally provide you and Wang Zhen for free, but I can't do that for the other eunuchs. You have to know that the cost of making this thing is very high, and it's not something from the great Ming dynasty. It comes from the sea. Do you understand? Yang Qindong pretended to be mysterious as he spoke. When Mao Mu heard that the thing came from the sea, he immediately understood. During the great Ming dynasty's maritime ban, once it came into contact with the sea, it would be a huge expense. Dong Shuai, this old servant understands. I will sell this thing at a high price in the imperial palace. After all, there is no free lunch in the world. If you want to get something, you have to pay a price. Very good. Seeing that Mao Mu was so understanding, Yang Qindong nodded approvingly. Go back and do your job well. If you need anything, just tell me. This young master will do his best to satisfy you. By the way, there is something I need you to do. These are 3 lowly women. I need to raise their status and make them into good people. Is there any problem? Yang Qindong said with a smile as he placed 3 contracts in front of Mao Mu. These 3 people may have offended Xi Ning and his brother. You have to think about it carefully. Mao Mu's hand had already reached out and was about to touch the contracts when he suddenly heard Yang Qindong's words. His hand paused in mid-air, but he quickly continued to reach out. Don't worry, Dong Shuai. Although it's a little troublesome, Xi Ning's power in the palace is not small. However, there are still many people who don't like him. As long as the money is in place, there won't be any problems. Then let's get it done quickly. How much money do you need? Yang Qindong nodded. Xi Ning was indeed powerful, but if this Mao Mu that he found couldn't solve such a small matter with the help of a large sum of money, then there was really no meaning in supporting him. What he needed was a helper, someone who could do things. For this, he was willing to pay the price. However, if the other party was a pile of mud, then there was no point in supporting him. Mao Mu was very clear that this was the first time Dong Shuai had given him something to do. If he did it well, his future would be limitless. If he messed it up, he might not even be able to guarantee his current position. Even if it was for himself, he had to do it well, and he had to do it beautifully. Mao Mu left with 5,000 taels of silver and a pile of diapers. Compared to when he came, he seemed to have straightened his chest when he left, and it was clear that he was full of ambition. Xi Sheng had been on duty for most of the night. When he was off duty, he slept all the way until lunch. When he was full and energized, he brought a few of his subordinates and headed straight for the home of Fan Ling, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of War. Last night, Tiger's Mane had suddenly appeared and used an unimaginable amount of money to buy the slave contracts of Lady Xue and the other 2. Fan Ling had already had the idea of exchanging 100 Flowers Hall. Without a pillar, 100 Flowers Hall could no longer regain its former glory. Although he could find new people to train again, how long would that take? Ever since his old father, Fan De, passed away, the influence of the Fan family was far from what it used to be. This also made Fan Ling want to withdraw from the red light district. He was wondering who to find next. At this time, Xi Sheng came. Although the price he offered was not high, or even a little low, Fan Ling still sold 100 Flowers Hall without any hesitation. It was still the same sentence. Without Lady Xue, 100 Flowers Hall had lost its greatest value. Making a move in time might be the best choice. Xi Sheng did not expect things to go so smoothly. He offered a relatively low price and waited for Fan Ling to raise the price. Then, everyone would bargain for a while. As long as the other party did not ask for too much, he would accept a price that was about the same. Last night, 100 Flowers Hall was very lively. In his eyes, a deal that could get both a beauty and money was suitable. However, Fan Ling was actually so tactful. Even when faced with the low price he offered, he still accepted it. This allowed him to pay a lot less in terms of cost. At this moment, it was as if he could already see a mountain of gold placed in front of him. Of course, there was also that white and beautiful body waving at him. After leaving Fan Manor, Xing took the contract of 100 Flowers Hall and found a place to have a good drink with a few of his men. He decided not to rush to make the matter public. He would go to 100 Flowers Hall in the evening and give Madame Xue a surprise. After knowing the truth, her face would become extremely beautiful. The group of people drank a lot of wine. In the end, their bodies were swaying a little. Only then did they support each other to reach the 100 Flowers Hall. However, once they entered, the atmosphere was very different from yesterday. Although there were still many people, they were all noisy and angry. Some of the people who came today were former regulars of 100 Flowers Hall, but most of them came for the 2 new songs. When they arrived here with a large sum of money full of expectations, they heard that Madame Xue had disappeared. Even Mu Lily, the procuress, was nowhere to be found. How could they let it go? They began to shout one by one. What are you shouting for? Seeing the chaotic atmosphere in the hall, Xing placed his saber on the table in front of him and roared loudly after a loud noise. This move was indeed effective. As soon as this voice came out, the originally noisy scene suddenly became much quieter. Everyone stared at Xing, their eyes were filled with confusion. What was this person doing here again? Why was he acting all high and mighty? This shout shocked everyone. Xing was very proud. He liked the feeling of being the center of attention. Okay, stop shouting. If you have any problems, tell me. I will solve it for you. By the way, I forgot to tell you that 100 Flowers Hall will be mine from now on. This is the contract of the transaction. In order to achieve the effect of justice, Xing took the initiative to show the contract in front of everyone. Immediately, several people of status came forward. After reading the contract, they all nodded at the same time. Among them was Wang Si, the editor of the Hanlin Academy. Shi Qianhu, since this place is already your property, may I ask if you still want to sing tonight? If you sing, of course, we'll pay the same amount of money. We'll spend it however we want. But if you don't sing, we will leave now. No matter how powerful you are, you can't force us to pay 1 tael of silver here. Wang Xi's grandfather was the current minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Ji. With such a relationship, he was not afraid of a small Qianhu of the Brocade Guard. Even if this person's brother was very favored by the emperor, his pride as a scholar made him not shrink back. That's right, that's right. With someone taking the lead, the people below naturally chimed in. No one was afraid of spending money, but spending money wrongly and becoming a sucker wasn't something anyone wanted to do. Xing did not care about Wang Si's criticism. Smelling of alcohol, he said complacently, "Who said I won't sing? Since I bought this place, of course, I want to make money. How can I destroy my own livelihood? Well, I will go to the procuress, Mu Lily, now and ask her to arrange Madame Xue to sing for everyone. Not only that, but she will sing 3 or 5 times today to let everyone enjoy it." In order to prove his courage as a new boss and win people's hearts, Xing announced loudly. His answer also attracted loud applause from the guests. They all said that Xing was a righteous and heroic person. Everyone's compliments made Xing feel even more confused. He laughed heartily and arranged for his subordinates to find Mu Lily. This time, he was going to order the beauties around as the boss. After all, he was not the first person to ask about Mu Lily and Madame Xue's whereabouts. When the subordinate ran back and whispered something in Xing's ear, Xing's face suddenly turned gloomy as he roared, "What's going on?" They ran away. Yes, they were taken away in the morning. The subordinate answered carefully, for fear that Shi Sheng would stab him in anger. They were taken away in the morning. Who did it? Shi Sheng had sobered up a lot. His intuition told him that things were not so simple. Why was it that as soon as he made his move, someone else beat him to it? Furthermore, he had just announced the fact that as soon as he became the new owner of 100 Flowers Hall, the flower pillar under him had disappeared without a trace. This was already not only cutting off his source of income, but also slapping him in the face, and it was an extremely resounding slap. If this matter could not be solved, he was afraid that he would become a laughing stock in the capital. No one could accept that kind of result. In the face of Shi Sheng's questioning, the few subordinates naturally kept silent, revealing a look of bewilderment. Investigate. Investigate for this lord. Whether it's to the heavens or to the earth, find out for me. Shi Sheng's roar resounded in the hall of 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment, he was really furious. Shi Sheng was enraged. As a result, a few of his subordinates scattered in all directions. Along with them, the other players also left. Since they couldn't listen to the music anymore, who would stay here and be Shi Sheng's next punching bag? Of course, Shi Sheng's subordinates did not run away. They went to investigate the whereabouts of Madame Xue and Madame Xue. The strength of the embroidered uniform guards was very strong. In less than 2 hours, they got the news and came back. Seeing his subordinates come back excitedly, Shi Sheng knew that the result was out. He immediately asked with a fierce look, "Tell me, where did they go?" At this moment, Shi Sheng felt that he had lost face. What he wanted to do most now was to catch Madame Xue and Mu Lily, and then use all kinds of means to let them know how regretful it was to offend him. "Sir, there's news. It's said that they went to the Yangjie village 15 miles south of the city." A subordinate ran up and reported as if he had received a reward. Chapter 90. Yang Village. Hearing that she was not in the capital but out of it, Shi Sheng's eyes were filled with anger, but at the same time, he was very happy. As an entertainer, she didn't stay in her own place of business. Instead, she ran around and even left the capital. Just based on this, he could use legal means to deal with her without being afraid of taking any responsibility. Let's go to Yang Village to catch her. He quickly made a decision in his mind. He would catch her immediately and bring her back with thunderous means. First, he would get the beauty, then the money, and then his reputation. He would let everyone know the consequences of provoking him. Before the curfew in the city, Shi Sheng went out of the city. In addition to his original 4 or 5 subordinates, he mobilized soldiers from 2 small banners. In total, more than 20 people rushed to the south of the city. As soon as Shi Sheng and the others went out of the city, they were seen by a pair of dormant eyes. There were fast horses galloping on a short road. They were spies of the security bureau. They had been paying attention to the movements of 100 Flowers Hall. Shi Sheng went out of the city. Seeing that his destination was Yang Village, their task was to send the news back to the village. In Yang Village, Yang Qindong was watching Madame Snow sing the new song, by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng, in the backyard. However, no matter how he looked at it, Madame Snow could not enter the stage. She looked absent-minded. Alas! Knowing what Shi Sheng was worried about, Yang Qindong shook his head. Sure enough, he could not do anything if his mind was not calm. Since that was the case, he could only wait for Shi Sheng to take the initiative to fall into the net. However, he did not know whether Shi Sheng would come here in anger. If he did not come, wouldn't it be troublesome? Yang Qindong did not like to wait passively. He preferred to take the initiative to attack. After not getting any news from Shi Sheng, Yang Qindong even thought of secretly sending someone to kill Shi Sheng. All he needed was a new sniper rifle and a spotter. It was guaranteed that he could easily take care of this person from 1,000 meters away. No one would know. Report. Tiger's man's figure appeared in the backyard. His appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Young master, Qing has brought over 20 embroidered uniform guards and is rushing towards us. Tiger's mane said excitedly as he half knelt and cupped his hands. Obviously, this did not scare him. On the contrary, he was very excited. Okay. Yang Qindong was also excited after hearing this. Is it finally here? Ha, let's go out and welcome him. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong laughed and walked out of the backyard in his cyan robe, leaving Mu Lily, Madame Xue, and Little Wire in a panic. Fortunately, Xiao Yin also stayed here. She had followed the sixth young master to Qing City. Knowing the young master's strength, she smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. Everything is within the young master's plan. There won't be any problems. You should continue to practice. When the young master comes back, try to perform better." Xiao Yin said it casually, but her nervousness could still be seen from Madame Xue and the other two. After all, they knew too little. Although Dong Shui was extraordinary, he had offended the embroidered uniform guards. Last year, even Qing suffered in front of them. Could Dong Shui, a new official, solve the problem? Of course, Yang Qindong could solve it, and there were many ways to do so. For example, if he showed his fangs, he could make Qing and more than 20 people disappear silently. No one would be able to trace it back to him afterwards. However, without evidence, it didn't mean that they couldn't suspect him. Whether it was the East Faction guards or the embroidered uniform guards, they didn't need any solid evidence. As long as they suspected you, they could take action. This was the damn privilege. Yang Qindong, who knew this, couldn't take this risk. Since he couldn't use his own strength, he could only borrow others' strength. After leaving the backyard, Yang Qindong began to remind Tiger's mane, who had become excited. Tell the brothers below not to move. Without the young master's permission, no one is allowed to move. Otherwise, they will be grounded for 3 days. By the way, I asked you to invite Lord Hu Zhangning to drink in advance. How did it go? Upon hearing that he would be grounded for 3 days, Tiger's mane, who had been full of fighting spirit, immediately became obedient. For these iron-blooded men, there were too few things in the world that could scare them. Because they weren't afraid, they became even more difficult to control. When he was at the docks, there were brothers who liked to cause trouble. However, no matter what kind of corporal punishment they received, they didn't seem to care at all. They just treated it as training. Later, the matter spread to Yang Qindong's ears, and he came up with the idea of confinement as a punishment. However, when people were locked up in a dark room for 3 days and had to eat and drink as usual, anyone who heard of this punishment was amused. Wasn't this just letting them rest? What kind of punishment was this? For a time, there were even people who deliberately caused trouble and wanted to experience this feeling. Naturally, the consequences were terrifying. No one spoke, no one paid attention to them, and they couldn't even see the slightest bit of sunlight for 3 days. Not many people could bear it. They roared, they cried bitterly, and they reflected on their mistakes. However, they could only be released after 3 days of confinement. When they finally came out and saw the sunlight and saw that there were people to talk to, they, who had almost collapsed, finally understood the severity of confinement. Although Tiger's mane hadn't experienced it personally, he had heard of this matter long ago. At the docks in Crimson City, everyone's expression changed at the mention of confinement. Now that Yang Qindong came up with this punishment, he couldn't help but be disobedient. Young master, don't worry. Without orders, no one will dare to do anything. Also, Lord Hu is on duty today. He's waiting for young master in front of the potato field. Especially when he heard that the young master personally invited him, he seemed very happy. Happy? Yang Qindong didn't understand and shook his head after hearing this. At this time, the night was dark and the wind was cool. If it wasn't for the good moon tonight, he really didn't know what was so happy about having someone on a date. However, even if Hu Changning didn't object, of course, it was something that Yang Qindong wished for. He immediately nodded and said, I'll go meet Lord Hu now. Remember to follow the plan. Yes. After Tiger's mane agreed, his entire body flashed and disappeared into the darkness, as if he had never appeared. Walking alone, Yang Qindong arrived in front of a large potato field. From afar, he could see a table filled with food and wine. On one side of the table was an empty seat, while on the other sat the guardian of the ironclad guard, Hu Zhangning. At this moment, Hu Changning was indeed in a good mood. This wasn't because he accepted the mission to protect the potatoes, but because of Yang Qindong's appointment. Hu Yan came to the Yang village and was very happy when she returned. She brought back many good things. All of this seemed to prove one thing, and that was that the relationship between his beloved daughter and Yang Qindong was not bad. As a father, the happiness of his children was naturally something that he greatly hoped for. Yang Qindong was young, but his performance was indeed old and steady, and his talent was outstanding. In addition, his family background was not bad. No matter how one looked at it, he was a good son-in-law. At least, he had already received the approval of his future father-in-law. In the middle of the night, when Yang Qindong personally invited him, Hu Changning thought that it must have something to do with his daughter. Could it be that he wanted to test his attitude? That must be it. Hu Changning confirmed his thoughts. He also decided to properly meet with Yang Qindong. Even if he was satisfied, he still needed to give him an appropriate beating. He wanted to let the sixth young master know how fortunate it was to be able to marry his daughter, and that he needed to know how to cherish it. In his heart, he was still thinking about how to beat Yang Qindong when they met. In the distance, the sixth young master, wearing a long green gown, walked over. Yu Guang had already noticed, but Hu Changning didn't have any intention of speaking first. Tonight, he was acting as the father-in-law. No matter what, he had to be reserved. Hu Changning didn't speak, and Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of speaking either. He couldn't guess the other party's thoughts, and even more so, he didn't think that he had only met Hu Yan once, and it actually involved the discussion of marriage. In his consciousness and thoughts, no matter what, he had to wait for a period of time first, and wait until everyone was familiar with each other before making a decision. After all, marriage wasn't child's play. It had to be done carefully. Yang Qindong's consciousness of the future made it impossible for him to guess Hu Changning's inner thoughts. Seeing that the other party didn't speak, the sixth young master was more than happy. What he wanted was to use the other party's identity and big shot to trick Shisheng. Before the main show started, he didn't know what to say. In this way, the two of them sat down like this. Then, without saying a word, they lowered their heads and drank like this. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little oppressive. Yang Qindong didn't speak, but Hu Changning wasn't unhappy in his heart. Instead, he was still excited. This must be him thinking about how to phrase it. Hee, since it's like this, I won't say anything. I'll just wait for you to take the initiative to bring it up and give you an invisible pressure. In the future, when his daughter really marries into the family, he will have more dignity as the father-in-law. Hu Changning thought self-righteously, and wanted to use this to put pressure on Yang Qindong to show the power and means of his future father-in-law. It was this strange combination of thoughts that made the two of them have no intention of leaving even though they didn't say a word. The atmosphere was delayed under such subtle emotions. When they had drunk no less than 5 glasses of wine, Hu Changning was a little impatient. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, this sixth young master's ability to keep his composure is pretty good. He can actually keep his composure. If this goes on, can we still talk about serious matters tonight? Is it going to be like this for the whole night? If so, it doesn't matter if the other party is young, but I'm in my 40s after all. Isn't this tormenting me? Chapter 91. Hu Zhangning's heart began to palpitate, but Yang Qindong did not notice. At this time, he was thinking, after scheming against Shisheng tonight, what would his brother, Shi Ning, do if he found out? How would he put out the fire? How would he do it step by step? He must have offended them, but how could he not find an opportunity to get angry? As for that Wang Zhen, would he step in and interfere? Would he be forced to make a move under the influence of benefits? What if Wang Zhen did not care? If that was the case, he could only take the risk and get rid of Xi Ning and Xi Xing early. But if he did that, it would be impossible for him not to attract attention. Yang Qindong was still thinking, but Hu Xiangning had been holding back for a long time. Finally, he could not take it anymore. After smacking his lips, he decided to take the initiative to speak. For the sake of his daughter's happiness, what was wrong with giving the other party a way out? Hu Xiangning had already thought of what to say and was slowly opening his mouth. At this time, the sound of running suddenly came from the distance. The sound of footsteps was especially loud in the dark night, and attracted the attention of Yang Qindong and Hu Xiangning. Knowing that the person in question had appeared, Yang Qindong immediately reacted and shouted according to his plan. "Who are you? This is a place of great fortune, stop." His voice was like thunder, and it was hard to imagine that it came from the mouth of a scholar like Yang Qindong. This shout was so loud that Hu Xiangning, who was at the side, only felt his eardrums hurt from the shock. How could he still think of asking anything? On the other hand, the newcomer was far away, so he wasn't affected much. Seeing a young man in green shouting there, he quickly responded, "Who are you?" "This official is Yang Qindong, the crown prince's horse servant." "Who are you?" "Stop." Yang Qindong had already seen the other party's attire with the help of the moonlight. He knew the other party's identity, but he still asked and shouted for the second time. The person who came was Xi Sheng. Since he was a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard, the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards wouldn't stop him. Since they were all part of the same system, he would still give them some face. Not to mention that Xi Xing had rushed here with an anxious look on his face, giving people the impression that he had received an important mission. Therefore, no one would be foolish enough to stop him. Xi Xing smoothly entered the interior of the Yangjia village. Along the way, he also learned about Yang Qindong's identity from his subordinates. It was just a matter of being promoted to a secondary class rank 5 official position because of the emperor's favor. There was nothing to be afraid of. Although he had Yang Rong as his father, that old man had been dead for many years. He was someone who could even bully the current Duke Qing, so why would he be afraid of a little brat? It was precisely because he knew Yang Qindong's background that Xi Sheng was no longer afraid. What he wanted was to find this person and teach him a lesson, letting him know his methods. Then, it would be much easier to ask him to hand over Madame Xue and the others. As soon as he entered the Yangjia village, he asked his colleagues where Yang Qindong was. When he learned that Yang Qindong was drinking with Hu Xiangning, he hurried over. Because he was too anxious, his subordinates were left dozens of meters behind him. When he came from afar, he heard a young man shouting. Then, when he knew that this person was his target, Yang Qindong, Xi Sheng was overjoyed. Without answering, he waved the embroidered spring saber in his hand and rushed straight to Yang Qindong. "Ah! What are you doing?" Yang Qindong's eyes were fixed on Xi Sheng. He was going to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. When he saw that the other party didn't say anything and waved his saber, he stepped back first and shouted, "What are you doing? This is a place of great auspicious holy objects. I am also an official of the imperial court. The emperor personally appointed me as the crown prince. What are you going to do?" Yang Qindong's panic-stricken appearance was a perfect representation of a scholar who saw a soldier and was unable to reason with him. This scene was also seen by Hu Xiangning, who was at the side. The aftershock of the vibration of the eardrum was completely absorbed. At this moment, Hu Xiangning also realized that someone was going to harm Yang Qindong. How could he let it go? If something happened to the sixth young master, how could his daughter argue with him? Not to mention that he happened to be at the scene. Whether it was public or private, he had no reason to ignore it. Clang! The sword bestowed by the emperor was pulled out of the scabbard. Hu Xiangning jumped in a few big steps and stopped in front of the rushing Xi Sheng. Seeing that Yang Qindong was getting closer and closer, Xi Xing's expression changed. Just as he was about to wave his saber, he recognized the person's identity with the help of the moonlight. He said, "So it is Lord Hu. I am Qianhu Xi Xing. Why are you stopping me?" Ah! This voice was so familiar. At such a close distance, Hu Jiangning recognized the person's identity and couldn't help but be startled. What was going on? Why was it Xi Xing? Hu Jiangning, who couldn't react quickly in his mind, was stunned there. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xi Xing flashed past him and continued to chase Yang Qindong in front of him. Xi Xing didn't have the intention to kill. He also knew that if he killed Yang Qindong here, the consequences wouldn't be something he could bear. Even if his older brother Xi Ning helped, there would be no avoiding a lawsuit. Therefore, he only wanted to scare the other party. As long as the other party admitted defeat and admitted his mistake, it would be enough to restore his face and reap enough benefits. In Xi Xing's eyes, it was not difficult to do this. With his skill, wasn't it easy to catch a scholar who was close to him? Although Xi Xing was domineering, his martial arts were not bad. At least he looked agile. On the other hand, Yang Qindong, who was being chased, had a panicked expression. He kept shouting and yelling, as if he would catch up at any time. However, it was precisely because Yang Qindong looked like he could be caught up at any moment that Xi Xing was unable to succeed. There were several times when he was about to slash at Yang Qindong with the back of his saber, but for some reason, Yang Qindong managed to dodge. That person was still dodging randomly, as if the reason he could not hit him was that his luck was too good. Was Yang Qindong really that lucky? During this chase, he saw at least 7 or 8 openings that Xi Xing revealed. If he wanted to, he could have beautifully seized the saber with his bare hands and killed the other party. However, he couldn't do this. The other party was the Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard. No matter what the reason was, if he killed the other party in public, it would be a big mistake and he would be held accountable. He couldn't fight back. He could only escape and then find the best opportunity to dig a big hole for Xi Xing. "Qianhu Xi, what are you doing? Are you openly killing an imperial court official? Stop it right now." In a flash, Xi Xing jumped over him and rushed to Yang Qindong. This made Hu Jiangning break out in cold sweat. He shouted and wanted to chase after him. However, at this time, Xi Xing's subordinates arrived. They naturally didn't dare to do anything because of Hu Jiangning's identity, but they could still stop him. Hu Jiangning, who found that he was surrounded, was anxious. He knew that he was outnumbered and couldn't find any opportunity. He immediately shouted into the darkness, "Little bastards, why don't you come out?" As soon as he shouted, at least 50 embroidered uniformed guard rushed out of the darkness. Among them was Lieutenant Sun Chuang, who had been beaten 10 times before. These people were the ones on duty today. They were responsible for the safety of Potato. They had been watching from afar since Yang Qindong and Hu Jiangning drank together. They didn't understand the reason, but they saw Xi Xing kill with their own eyes. However, seeing that the people who came were also embroidered uniform guard, Sun Chuang and the others couldn't show up for a while. Who knew what had happened? They didn't want the divine armaments to fight and implicate them. But then, Hu Jiangning's shout came. With the orders of the superior, these people couldn't hide anymore. They all showed up in the darkness and surrounded the group of people brought by Xi Xing. A wise man wouldn't fight when the odds were against him. Seeing that there were more people than them, Xi Xing's subordinates began to scatter and flee. Some of them took the opportunity to rush into the protected potato field. For a time, countless bean seedlings were trampled, making a mess. Because of the appearance of Hu Jiangning's subordinates, the place became completely chaotic. And in this chaos, Xi Xing finally grabbed Yang Qindong's arm and raised the embroidered spring saber in his hand high. No! Hu Jiangning, who was a few meters away, saw this scene clearly with the help of the moonlight. He immediately shouted to stop it. Xi Xing was taken aback by this shout. At this moment, Yang Qindong, who was caught, suddenly moved his arm. He didn't know where the strength came from, but it made his right hand numb. Then, the saber fell down and landed on Yang Qindong's chest. Suddenly, a stream of bright red blood spurted out and sprayed on Xisheng's body, dyeing his flying fish robe red. Ah! At the same time, the green-clothed Yang Qindong fell to the ground in a timely manner. When Yang Qindong fell, the eyes of Hu Zhangning, who was chasing after Yang Qindong, had already turned red. He was unable to control his anger, and when he arrived behind Xisheng, he stabbed out with his sword. Feeling a gust of cold wind behind him, Xisheng habitually dodged to the side, but in the end, because of the potato vines under his feet, he was a beat too slow. It was because of this beat that his right leg was slashed by a long sword. The sharp sword immediately cut through a meridian, and Xisheng painfully fell to the ground with a plop. "Tie him up." After stabbing Xisheng, Hu Zhangning shouted loudly. Then, he stretched out his hand in front of Yang Qindong, who was lying on the ground. At this moment, an even faster figure suddenly appeared in front of Yang Qindong. He quickly carried him on his back and ran straight to the Yang family manor. Chapter 92. The person who came was Tiger's man. He had been secretly observing the situation. When he saw that the young master had been cut and was bleeding, he immediately became anxious. Without caring about anything else, he rushed out and carried Yang Qindong on his back. Then, he recklessly ran into the manor. Beta Persei also appeared with him. He didn't snatch the job of carrying the young master, but he did stay where he was. He stared coldly at Hu Zhangning, a huge murderous aura leaping out of his body. It was clear that he was ready to kill if there was any disagreement. "Who are you?" An embroidered uniform guard didn't understand. Seeing that someone was blocking in front of Lord Hu, he wanted to step forward and question him. However, before he could move, he was stopped by Lieutenant Sun Chuang at the side. "Get back!" With an angry roar, he pushed the blind embroidered uniform guard behind him. Others might not know, but Sun Chuang, who had suffered in the Yang family's old manor in Jianing Manor, was very clear about Beta Persei's strength. Now that his master was injured, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was enraged. Hu Zhangning naturally recognized Beta Persei and knew how powerful this person was. He didn't act rashly, but still said out of concern, "I just want to see how Yang Shima's injuries are. There's no need for Lord Hu to worry. My master has the elixir in his hands." Beta Persei spoke as if he could hold back 10,000 men. Then, he stared coldly at the crowd, all the muscles in his body ready to explode at any moment. Feeling the pressure of that aura, Hu Zhangning knew that he couldn't force his way in. He turned around and vented his anger on Xisheng. "Come, capture all these people who destroyed the auspicious land. Tomorrow morning, when the city gates open, we will enter the palace to see the emperor." With Hu Zhangning's order, the embroidered uniform guards who came with Xisheng were beaten to the ground one by one. Any slight resistance was met with a series of punches and kicks, making them cry for their parents. Yang Manor's inner courtyard. Tiger's man ran back with bloodstains on his back. As soon as he entered the side hall, he was seen by Qiao Yin and the other girls. "Ah! Young master!" Qiao Yin only managed to shout once before her vision blurred. Then, her body fell to the ground. Fortunately, the maidservant Xiao Wei reacted very quickly and reached out to catch it to avoid the danger of touching the ground. "Dong Shui!" Madame Shui and Mu Lily also shouted in surprise. Then, their faces turned pale and they didn't know what to do. On the other hand, Yang Qindong, who was being carried on his back, was still very calm. He said to Tiger's mane in a weak voice, "Wake Yin, up and let her apply medicine for me. No one else is allowed to enter my bedroom without my orders." "Yes." Tiger's mane replied with tears in his eyes. On the other side, Xiao Wei had already shaken Qiao Yin awake. After knowing the young master's intention, she ignored her weak legs and hurried to the bedroom. Yang Qindong, who entered the bedroom first, was placed on the bed by Tiger's man. After seeing that there was no one around, he let out a sigh of relief and said, "Hey, Tiger's man, can you run slower next time? Do you know that the young master was originally fine? But when you jolted me on your back, I almost suffered internal injuries." As he spoke, Yang Qindong threw a bag of chicken blood to the side and took off the bulletproof vest under his green robe. There was a cut on the bulletproof vest, but it was only a scratch. As for the underwear under the bulletproof vest, there was not a single scratch. Tiger's man's eyes widened. "Young master. What about me? Your skills were all taught by the young master. Why don't you think that Shi Sheng, with his mediocre skills, can hurt me?" Yang Qindong asked with an expression that said, "Why don't you use your brain?" After speaking, he did not wait to see if Tiger's man understood. He continued, "The young master's injuries will continue to be feigned. Before this matter is resolved, no one is allowed to enter the bedroom without permission. But if anyone comes, just tell them that the young master is sleeping. Xiao Yin is the only one taking care of him." After speaking, Yang Qindong waved his hand. Tiger's man left the bedroom in a daze. At that moment, Xiao Yin rushed over with tears in her eyes. Before she even entered the room and saw Yang Qindong, she began to cry loudly. "Young master." He reached out to touch his forehead. "Yin, the young master is fine. Don't cry like that. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll scare him until he falls ill." "Ah." Xiao Yin covered her small mouth with her hand. At this moment, her face was like a pear blossom in the rain. She saw that Yang Qindong had already bared his upper body, revealing his well-built muscles. It was so perfect, and he didn't look the least bit injured. At that moment, she did not care about the difference between men and women. She sprinted forward and gently stroked his bare chest with her small hand. Then, with a look of surprise, she said, "Young master, are you the reincarnation of a god? Are you invulnerable? He was clearly covered in blood just a moment ago. How could he be completely fine now?" This was simply unbelievable. The young master is not the reincarnation of a god, nor is he invulnerable. It was just a show. Yang Qindong smiled as he picked up the half-filled bag of chicken blood on the ground. "Look, this is why you were bleeding just now." After Yang Qindong's detailed explanation, Xiao Yin realized that the young master was indeed not injured. It was something called a bulletproof vest that protected him. Everything was just a show. After learning the truth, Xiao Yin breathed a sigh of relief. Then, with a pleading tone, she said, "Young master, can you promise Xiao Yin that you won't scare me again in the future?" "All right, don't do it again, don't do it again." Yang Qindong laughed heartily. Then, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "But you still have to act. Yin, also needs to cooperate with the young master, understand?" Xiao Yin's ear was tickled by that breath. She was already blushing and could only nod vigorously. As for what the young master said and what he wanted her to do, she probably could not hear clearly for a while. Outside the bedroom, Madame Shui, Mu Lily, and Little Wei were kneeling. Dong Shui was injured because of them. They were kneeling here to pray for Dong Shui and to get better soon. Otherwise, even if they died now, they would be too ashamed to face anyone. In the small courtyard outside the bedroom, Yang Er and Yang Si stood at the door. They were like two gatekeepers guarding the door, preventing anyone from coming in to peek. No matter how much Madame Shui begged, they could only shake their heads in disapproval. This time, the sixth young master was injured. As the family's guards, they were responsible. Now, they could not wait to receive the military order to kill Shi Sheng. At this time, they were still full of anger. How could they be nice to others? No matter how beautiful Madame Shui was, at this time, in their eyes, she was nothing more than a pink skeleton. "How is Yang Shima?" Outside the small courtyard, Hu Zhangning rushed in with an anxious expression. Beside him was Lieutenant Sun Chuang. "Stop. Seeing the two people coming, Beta Persei said unceremoniously. Hearing this, Hu Zhangning and Sun Chuang could not help but stand in place. This person had left a big shadow in their hearts. As soon as they saw this person, they could not help but feel weak in the knees. Looking at this person's ferocious face, no one dared to rush over. It was unknown when, but Tiger Ray had appearing directly opposite Hu Zhangning. Lord Hu. After cupping his fists in greeting, Hu Mang said in a booming voice, "Young master is currently applying the medicine. Once the medicine takes effect, he will most likely fall asleep. Fortunately, the wound is not very deep. There should be no problem after a few days of recuperation." How is Xixing now? First, he politely told them that the young master was fine, but it was not appropriate for them to visit him. Then, he turned the blame to Xixing. It's good that Yang Xianma is fine. This is also my negligence. As for Xixing, he is currently imprisoned, and because the gates to the capital are closed, he cannot enter. Once the gates open at dawn, this lord will personally escort Xixing into the palace to meet his majesty. When the time comes, I will definitely give Yang Xianma an explanation. Hu Changning said angrily. At this time, he hated Xixing to the core. Xixing took advantage of his brother's power and didn't put him, a superior, in his eyes. He even hurt his future son-in-law, Yang Qindong. Just now, he had seen dozens of people running around in the fields. Who knew how many potatoes they had destroyed in that short period of time? He had to give an explanation for all of this. Then he could only use Xixing. Although he did not want to offend the eunuchs, he did not want to take the blame for no reason. Xixing was destined to be unlucky this time. Everything would depend on how much help his brother, Xi Ning, could give him. Xixing was going to be in trouble. Good, I hope Lord Hu can do as you say. As for here, I ask Lord Hu to go back first. My lord is asleep and will not see anyone. Tiger's man wanted Hu Zhangning to express his position. When he found out that the young master was only acting and wasn't really injured, the anger in his heart had lessened by a lot. If that wasn't the case, the brocade guards wouldn't have been able to stop them from snatching the victory, and the result would have been 1,000 cuts. Hu Zhangning wanted to ask if Yang Qindong's life was in danger. After all, from the scene at that time, he had lost a lot of blood. Now that he knew that Yang Xianma was fine, he was relieved. He knew that he had missed this opportunity and it was not appropriate to force his way in. Moreover, whether or not he could force his way in was another matter. He could only cup his fists and say, "Thank you for your hard work. This official will take his leave first. I will visit Yang Xianma in 2 days." Hu Zhangning left. When he left, his complexion was obviously much better. Yang Qindong's life was not in danger. This matter could be salvaged. At least, his guilt was not so great. As for how this matter should be resolved, it needed to be decided by the emperor. It was not something that a fourth-rank official like him could decide. Chapter 93. Madame Snow and the other 2 girls were still kneeling on the ground. The 3 girls had been sobbing since Hu Zhangning came in and left, as if they were the biggest sinners who had hurt Yang Qindong. In the bedroom, Qiao Yin had already helped Yang Qindong take a bath and lie on the bed. Only then did she remember that Madame Snow and the other 2 girls were still kneeling outside the yard. She asked carefully, "Young master, what should we do with them? It's late at night. They'll get sick if they keep kneeling like this. Ask them to leave." "Forget it. Ask Madame Snow to come in and ask Mu Lily and Wire to leave." Yang Qindong thought for a while and shook his head. If he did not let them in, the 3 girls would not listen to him and leave. He didn't want to end up causing the 3 girls to fall sick while he was fine. "Okay," Qiao Yin answered obediently. At this moment, she was not jealous at all. The young master could not be her only young master. She had thought about this for a long time. With one more sister to take care of the young master, perhaps the young master would live a happier life. As long as the young master was happy, she would be happy too. Outside the bedroom, Madame Shui got the message and could enter the bedroom. Mu Lily and Wire both breathed a sigh of relief. They were worried that they couldn't do anything. Now that Madame Shui could go in and help, they could go back to rest. At least, they didn't have to feel so guilty. Madame Snow followed Xiao Yin into the bedroom with a worried look. She saw Yang Qindong lying on the bed. At that moment, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing out. With a plop, she knelt down and said, "Dong Shui, it's all our fault for implicating you. We've already made a decision. Tomorrow morning, we'll enter the city and ask for forgiveness from Shisheng." Nonsense. Yang Qindong, who was going to rest, immediately opened his eyes. His expression suddenly became very serious. "Remember, your lives belong to the young master. Without the order of the young master, no one can make decisions without my permission. As for Shisheng, he can't even protect himself. He won't make trouble for you." Seeing Yang Qindong's serious look, Madame Snow trembled with fear. She knelt on the ground and did not dare to make a sound. Xiao Yin came forward, helped her up, and then whispered something in her ear. Madame Snow's face changed again and again. Finally, she looked at Yang Qindong with confusion. Her eyes were full of disbelief. Yang Qindong naturally knew what this gaze meant. At that moment, he did not hold back and directly lifted the blanket, revealing his strong and uninjured chest. He said, "Look, look. Yin did not lie to you. I am indeed not injured." Ah! Madame Snow did the same thing as Xiao Yin. She covered her mouth with her hand. Her face was full of disbelief. After seeing so much blood in the side hall, she thought that Dong Shui was going to die. Who would have thought that he would be fine? How did he do that? "All of you, come over here. This young master will tell you slowly." Madame Snow's surprised face was so cute. Yang Qindong's heart skipped a beat. His body reacted unconsciously. He waved his hand and asked Xiao Yin and Madame Snow to come to his bedside. The two women did not suspect anything and hurriedly came to the side of the bed. Suddenly, a pair of big hands reached over and forcefully pulled the two women into the bed. Suddenly, a masculine man's breath rushed into the two women's nostrils. Ah! At this moment, they realized what was going on. They instinctively wanted to struggle, but when they remembered that the person hugging them was Yang Qindong, the two women suddenly blushed. They just lowered their heads and didn't resist at all. Not bad. It's easier to talk like this. Ha! Yang Qindong laughed heartily. Although he was not ready to do anything, especially with two women at the same time, it was a very happy thing to have beautiful women in his arms. The two women were very cooperative. They leaned on Yang Qindong's broad shoulders. Their faces were full of shyness and happiness. "Come on, sing a song for the young master. Put me to sleep." Feeling that his body was about to react unnaturally, Yang Qindong suppressed his thoughts and said to Madame Snow, "Okay." Madame Snow was very obedient. She immediately sang the song that she had just learned, by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. Don't sing a new song. Sing an old song for the young master. Yang Qindong was used to listening to the songs of the later generations. He did not know much about the songs of the present, so he wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about them. The next moment, Madame Shui began to play an old tune. The lingering melody was like a lullaby. Before long, Yang Qindong began to snore. He was really tired. There were too many things he had to do and think about in the past few days. He had to bear all the pressure by himself. Yang Qindong had actually fallen asleep, causing Xiao Yin and Madame Snow to involuntarily smile. Next, the two women made the same shameful action, which was to take off their coats, leaving only their undergarments. They leaned against Yang Qindong and snuggled up to each other. Not long after, they fell asleep. The guards outside the bedroom, Beta Persei and Yang Si, had been replaced by Yang Wu and Yang Lu. In the dark, Dao Xiao and a team of 10 guards were secretly watching everything to prevent anyone from getting close to the small courtyard. If anyone dared to do so, Jiu Wu, with a silencer and a weapon, would show him the fragility of life. The sky slowly brightened. Hu Xiangning, who could not wait any longer, led a team of 100 brocade guards to escort Shi Sheng and more than 20 men to the capital. As soon as the city gate opened, they entered the city and went straight to the inner city. In the imperial palace, there was no news from the court. The civil and military officials were still gathered in the court as usual, kneeling to the emperor and discussing the affairs of the world. Emperor Zhu Qizhen, who did not seem to have enough sleep, yawned from time to time, and then listlessly listened to the officials' reports. The emperor was diligent in his work. Since ancient times, this had become a custom. Almost all the leaders had to do this. Otherwise, they would not be able to hold power. As such, very few emperors would sleep in. In comparison, Yang Qindong was much more fortunate. At this moment, he was slowly waking up. According to his usual routine, it should be time for him to get up and go for a morning run. However, instead of a morning run, he was greeted with an erection. This was something that all men in their prime would encounter. His body was the first to react. Yang Qindong, who was hugging 2 women, wanted to get up, but it was very inappropriate. Was he supposed to set up a tent in front of the 2 women? How embarrassing would that be? In addition, he had to tell others that he was injured. If he could get up and continue to run, it would be inexcusable. Let's go back to sleep. Yang Qindong tried to convince himself. He ignored the warning of his biological clock and wanted to continue sleeping. But at this moment, Xiao Yin's body moved slightly on his left, and her breathing seemed to become heavier. For a long time, Xiao Yin had a very regular pattern of waking up and sleeping. For example, at this time, she would usually get up to prepare to serve the young master. Although she didn't need to make breakfast, she came to the young master's room to tidy it up and fold the blankets. So, the moment Yang Qindong woke up, she also woke up. Her hand inadvertently swept over Yang Qindong's body and touched that towering pillar. In that instant, Xiao Yin completely woke up. Her face flushed red as she recalled where she was staying at this moment. She thought about how the young master was lying next to her and seemed to have a reaction. What should she do? Should she ignore it and continue to pretend to sleep, or should she help the young master? She had heard the old women in the manor say that once a man had that intention, it would be very uncomfortable if it wasn't resolved. Xiao Yin definitely didn't want Yang Qindong to feel uncomfortable. So what should she do? What should she do? Her heart thumped wildly. In just a few breaths, Xiao Yin made a decision. She took a deep breath and mustered up her courage. Her small hand groped toward Yang Qindong's crotch. Knowing that Xiao Yin had woken up, Yang Qindong felt very awkward. Just as he was thinking about how to return to normal, a small hand suddenly touched him. In that instant, his body couldn't help but tremble. The feeling made him feel very comfortable, but also very nervous. It was really indescribable with words. Young master, let Yin serve you. Suddenly, he heard the soft sound of drizzling rain. Before he could react, Xiao Yin had already dove into the blankets and swam towards that place. No! Yang Qindong instinctively wanted to stop her. It was this shout that woke Madame Xue on the other side. Due to the nature of Madame Xue's work, she didn't wake up very regularly. In addition, Yang Qindong lying next to her gave her a great sense of security, so she fell into a deep sleep. If it wasn't for Xiao Yin's shout, she probably wouldn't have woken up. After waking up, Madame Xue forgot that she was only wearing a dudu. On the contrary, she only remembered that the young master seemed to be injured. Is he feeling unwell? She asked anxiously. When Yang Qindong saw that Madame Snow had woken up, he felt a little awkward. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Yin moved. In that instant, he felt a warm sensation spread throughout his body. He couldn't help but shiver slightly. Along with the shiver, he let out an "oh" sound from his mouth. I'm so scared of crabs. I'll omit 100,000 words here. Chapter 94. While young Qindong was still blissfully confused, the court, which was originally calm, was in an uproar because of Hu Xiangning's sudden arrival. Your Majesty, this is the entire story of what happened last night. Hu Xiangning knelt on the ground and explained in detail what he saw and heard. Then, he lowered his head deeply, as if he was waiting for the emperor's judgment. After Hu Xiangning told the story of what happened in Yangjia village, the court officials suddenly exploded. Without the emperor's order and without the slightest evidence, a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard dared to kill a fifth-rank official who had just made a great contribution. This was simply lawlessness. Not to mention, according to Hu Xiangning's explanation, a lot of potatoes were also wasted because of this. Overnight, Lord Hu brought people to dig up the trampled land and found that the potatoes in the field were greatly damaged. Many of them were already deformed. Of course, they didn't know that all of this was arranged by Yang Qindong in advance. Those potatoes were also cleaned up in advance. They didn't know that all of this was done by Yang Qindong, but they knew that the loss of potatoes was a loss to the court, the country, the emperor, and the court officials. Immediately, as the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zuo was the first to jump out. Originally, he was worried that there weren't enough potatoes. Because of this, he wanted to discuss with Yang Qindong and ask him to contribute more potatoes from his private fields. But now, not only did the country's potatoes suffer from the loss of production, Yang Qindong was also injured. If he couldn't punish Xisheng now, how could he negotiate with him? If he didn't punish the murderer, how could Yang Qindong be satisfied? If it were him, how could he be satisfied? Your Majesty. With a plop, he knelt on the ground. Xisheng has no respect for your Majesty, no respect for the law of the country, and did things based on his mood. He actually wanted to kill a court official. If this matter isn't severely punished, I'm afraid that the hearts of all the court officials will be cold. With Wang Zuo taking the lead, the Minister of Rights, Hu Ming, also knelt on the ground. For the sake of his son's future, he had to ruthlessly deal with Xisheng this time. Otherwise, if he had already offended Xisheng's son, wouldn't he be punished afterwards? Your Majesty, this subject agrees with Lord Wang's request to severely punish the murderer Xisheng. This subject agrees. Du Qing, the representative of the military, Zhang Fu, who had always been a wooden block in the imperial court, was also kneeling on the ground, his face full of resentment. Last year, his family's fertile land had been seized by the two brothers, Xi Ning and Xisheng, causing his reputation to hit rock bottom. After that, he had been depressed and was prepared to spend the rest of his life as a loser. And now, the opportunity to counterattack had come. The two civil officials had taken the initiative to jump out. How could he be polite? He immediately expressed his thoughts. After the three of them, the other officials and generals also got down on their knees one by one, all of them wearing indignant expressions as they cursed the lawless and overjoyed man. Ying Zong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, had an ugly expression on his face. He had long regarded the potato as a great auspicious item and announced it to the world. It was equivalent to an imperial item. But Xisheng actually dared to bring people to attack and trample on the auspicious item. This was simply ignoring the existence of imperial power. Even if you have enmity with Yang Qindong and want to deal with him, you can find a safe place to do it. Why do you have to do it on the auspicious item's crops? Isn't this the same as the god of longevity hanging himself? Are you tired of living? At this moment, Ying Zong really wanted to order Xisheng to be killed as a warning to others. But at this time, Wang Zhen, who was standing on the side, opened his mouth. Your Majesty, this matter is really strange. Why did Lord Shi kill Yang Shima? Why did he choose to do it on the auspicious item's crops? All of this needs to be investigated. In this old servant's humble opinion, we should first clarify the whole story before making a decision. Originally, Wang Zhen was very angry after hearing Hu Xiangning's words. He also wanted to kill Hu Xiangning to relieve the hatred in his heart. After all, he and Yang Qindong already had a common interest. Just yesterday, Mao Mu, the court eunuch of the ceremony directorate, gave him a good item called diapers. With it, he really didn't need to worry about embarrassing himself on the spot because of his body. Wang Zhen also knew that these things came from Yang Qindong's hands and were brought to the palace by Mao Mu to sell. The main consumer group was the court eunuchs. Moreover, a single diaper was not cheap and actually cost 2 taels of silver. Fortunately, he could get 10% of the benefits from these 2 taels of silver. Many little drops make an ocean. Naturally, it was a profitable way to make money. With a common interest, Xing still wanted to harm Yang Qindong and even wanted to kill him. This was an unforgivable matter. But no matter what, this person was Ning's younger brother and his only brother. Just based on this point, he had to stand up and speak up. The reason why Wang Zhen could have such power, other than Zhu Qizhen's great trust in him, was that he had the support of most of the court eunuchs. It was precisely because he had such confidence that he could be so unscrupulous and smooth when doing things. Ning was one of the more powerful ones among those who supported him. If he couldn't speak up for Xing in this matter, then he would naturally offend him and his leadership position would be shaken. This wasn't something he wanted to see. This was why he hesitated and spoke up to help, wanting to entrust this matter to Zhu Qizhen. Originally, he already had a decision in his heart, but after hearing Wang Zhen's words, Zong immediately gave up his original idea and nodded in agreement. That's right, teacher's words are very reasonable. We have to investigate this matter thoroughly first. How about this, teacher will handle this matter. Once there is a result, we can just let us and the officials know. Thank you, Your Majesty. Wang Zhen quickly knelt on the ground. Your Majesty is wise. All right, if there's nothing else, you can leave the court. Zong waved his hand. He was in a bad mood this morning, so he didn't have the heart to govern. He raised it up high and gently put it down. The matter actually ended like this. After the emperor left, Wang Zhen gave an order. Send Xing to the imperial prison. At the same time, send Ji Ning to Yangjia Manor to investigate this matter. Since the power was in his hands, the person he sent must be a trusted aide. Ji Ning, this trusted aide, was put to good use. The officials who were still kneeling on the ground were all furious when they heard this answer, but there was nothing they could do. This matter had already been handed over to the East Ministry to handle. The result would most likely be reduced to a small matter and a small matter to nothing. As for the victim, Yang Qindong, he was after all still too young. Xing alone was enough to injure him. Once the East Ministry stepped in, how could he withstand the pressure? At least, the officials didn't have any hope. Yangjia Manor. Early in the morning, the 6th young master had a pleasant and happy morning. Although it was the first time Qiao Yin had done such a thing, she still satisfied him with her cherry lips, allowing him to completely vent the depression he had been feeling for many days. Madame Snow finally understood what had happened. She immediately blushed and felt ashamed. Fortunately, Yang Qindong pretended to be asleep, which saved everyone from embarrassment. However, the 3 of them knew that after this morning's incident, their relationship had changed subtly. Even Wan Shi was afraid to take the first step. Once he took the first step, many things would follow naturally. Qiao Yin and Madame Snow even began to discuss who would serve him at night. Breakfast was served by the 2 women and delivered to Yang Qindong's mouth. He couldn't help but enjoy the bliss of having 2 women. This time, not only was his stomach full, but his big hands were also moving up and down. He was addicted to touching the 2 women and gained a lot of benefits. Naturally, the 2 women wanted to reject but still welcomed him, causing the bedroom to be filled with the sound of panting. All the happiness slowly dissipated after the appearance of Tiger's mane. Young master, Ji Ning from the Eastern Palace is here. He brought many tonics, saying that they are for young master to nourish your body. Eunuch Malmu is also here. He is waiting in the side hall. Yang Qindong's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that the people from the Eastern Palace had condescended to give him gifts, and Wang Zhen had not only sent his confidant Ji Ning but also Malmu, it was obvious that he wanted to make peace. In that case, Xisheng should be fine now. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong couldn't help but sigh softly. Originally, he thought that since he had given the potatoes to the emperor and many benefits to Wang Zhen, he should be considered an important person in the other party's heart. Today, he had been wronged, so they should stand up for him. But now, it seemed that he had been too optimistic. He was just 1,000 commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Xisheng. Because he had a powerful elder brother, Xi Ning, everything that he had given up had become a thing of the past. In the end, he still had to become the sacrifice, the one who had to give in. After treating me like this, if this young master doesn't replace me, what else can I do? The incident had caused Yang Qindong to understand the truth. With such an emperor and a eunuch who couldn't differentiate right from wrong, there was no hope for him. If he allowed this to continue, there would be a day when he would become a sacrifice. At that time, it would be too late for him to regret it. After firming up his inner beliefs, Yang Qindong suppressed the idea of starting a riot now. The target in his heart was too big, and the number of Han people he needed was unimaginable. If he were to start a war now, although he was confident that he wouldn't be defeated, the ones who would be harmed in the end would still be the Han people and the common people. This was not something he wanted to see. For the sake of this goal, he could only endure for now. Tiger's mane, I won't be seeing Ji Ning. Call Malmu over. Chapter 95. Since he was prepared to back down, Yang Qindong had to put on a show of respect. What was the point of meeting Ji Ning? To make him lower his head in front of him? The sixth young master would never do such a thankless task. In the side hall, Ji Ning sat on the left while Malmu sat on the right. Both of them were looking straight ahead. Gentlemen, the sixth young master has a message for eunuch Mao. Please enter his bedroom. Lord Ji, if you have something to do, you can go ahead. Tiger's mane entered the hall and clasped his hands. Ji Ning stood up with a satisfied look on his face, as though he had expected this to happen. Good. Then I'll take my leave first. Please send my regards to the sixth young master. Ji Ning's task was to mediate between the two of them. In order to achieve his goal, he had to lower his head when necessary. Fortunately, Yang Qindong was tactful. If he didn't want to see Ji Ning, he wouldn't have to see Ji Ning lowering his head. Ji Ning had to accept this favor. Good. Lord Ji, I'll definitely pass on your message to my young master. Tiger's mane understood Yang Qindong's intentions and was naturally very polite to Ji Ning. Ha ha ha. Ji Ning laughed loudly and turned to leave, his face full of self-satisfaction. Malmu was left behind. He asked Tiger's mane anxiously, did something happen to the sixth young master? Please follow me, eunuch Mao. You'll know when you see him. Tiger's mane knew that Malmu had already sided with his young master. But even so, unless the young master ordered him to do so, he wouldn't say a word. The bedroom was still filled with fragrance. Naturally, it was the fragrance left behind by Qiao Yin and Madame Snow. As soon as Malmu entered the bedroom, he immediately sensed the scent. He couldn't help but be delighted. This at least proved that the sixth young master's injuries weren't serious. Now, he could be at ease. He had just expressed his loyalty yesterday. If something happened to the sixth young master today, he really didn't know what to do. You're here. Take a seat. Yang Qindong leaned against the headboard and looked at eunuch Malmu with a normal expression. Sixth young master, are you all right? After this old servant found out about it, I was so anxious that I couldn't even eat. All right, tell me what eunuch Wang thinks. When Yang Qindong saw that Mao Mu was about to use his flattery, he had no choice but to interrupt him and get straight to the point. Knowing that the sixth young master didn't like flattery, Mao Mu tactfully stopped and got down to business. Eunuch Wang said that he hopes that the sixth young master will be magnanimous and spare Xisheng for the sake of him and eunuch Xining. As for the conditions, he allows this old servant to be promoted to eunuch penning of the ceremony directorate. Although I'm ranked last, it's still a big step up. At the same time, he promises that Xisheng won't cause trouble for the sixth young master. Also, when you do things in the capital in the future, the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards will give you face and won't cause trouble for you. After saying these words, Mao Mu lowered his head a lot. He received the most from this so-called exchange, so he didn't have to say anything more. Mao Mu's promotion from attendant to penning of the ceremony directorate was a step that many people wouldn't be able to achieve in their lifetime without enough merit or ability. This was equivalent to a small eunuch becoming the head of eunuchs, and these were the conditions that Wang Zhen had to pay. As for the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards not causing trouble for him, it was better to say that they were giving him face than saying that they were threatening him. The meaning was very obvious. If Yang Qindong didn't agree and insisted on killing Xisheng, then these two departments would keep an eye on the Yang family manor. If there was even the slightest movement, the Yang family would be in big trouble. After understanding the crux of the matter, Yang Qindong's expression turned cold. This Wang Zhen was really an ingrate that couldn't be fed. Fortunately, he had less than a year to live. Otherwise, with the sixth young master's temperament, he would probably send Tiger's mane and the others to take his life tonight. Don't bother with a person who's about to die. Let people off when possible. Take a step back and you'll see the world. All kinds of advice from saints flowed into Yang Qindong's mind, making him finally make up his mind to take a step back. As for what would happen next, he would urge Gao Xiong and the others to take action on Ryukyu Island. He had to quickly seize more territory. Only when he was strong would others not dare to bully him and ignore him. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. When he finally returned to reality, Yang Qindong smiled and patted Mao Mu on the shoulder. Good. This young master used a knife wound in exchange for your promotion. No matter how I look at it, it's a good deal. How about this? When you go back, tell Eunuch Wang that this matter is over. Sixth young master. At this moment, Mao Mu was so touched that his nose turned sour. He thought that in the face of a powerful group of eunuchs, Yang Qindong would give in, but he didn't expect him to be so straightforward. If that was the case, it seemed that the biggest beneficiary was himself. He'd only been with him for 2 days, and he'd been promoted twice. The path he'd chosen was indeed correct. Okay. I don't like to express my position through words. I'd rather see everything put into action. How is it? How are diapers selling in the palace? Yang Qindong didn't bring up the previous matter and spoke in a casual manner. It's selling very well. After all, it's like these things are tailor-made for us eunuchs. Now, all the eunuchs with some status come to me to get the goods. Because of this, some people have bad ideas. But this time, I've been promoted twice, and I have Eunuch Wang behind me. Others don't dare to do anything to me. When talking about the situation in the palace, Mao Mu's tone became much more excited. He thought of yesterday afternoon, when several eunuchs who used to ignore him took the initiative to greet him and called him Eunuch Mao. He felt a burst of elation. Good, very good. Continue doing what you're doing. For those eunuchs who have requests but don't have money, you can have them use other things in exchange. For example, some information they've heard. Then, sort out what you think is useful and send it to this young master. Do you understand? Yang Qindong said encouragingly. Mao Mu was a chess piece he'd buried in the palace, and on the surface. At the very least, Wang Zhen knew that the two of them had a deep relationship. But this was just a smokescreen. In reality, he wanted information from the palace, and he wanted to use Mao Mu as the center to quickly develop his own power. In the eyes of the sixth young master, the intelligence war wasn't just about information from the capital. He had to know all the information from the officials and the palace. Only then could he make the most accurate decisions. This servant understands. Mao Mu patted his chest and promised, and then he added, I also know a few things about Brother Xi Ning's illegal activities. As long as the sixth young master needs it, I can send someone to sort it out at any time. There's no need. Remember, you're only looking for information. Before you've stabilized your position, don't think about dealing with anyone. On the contrary, you have to maintain good relations with everyone. Do you understand? Yang Qindong shook his head. Xi Ning's fate had already been explained in history. As long as nothing unexpected happened, someone else would deal with him. There was no need for him to do anything. Although Mao Mu didn't understand why Yang Qindong had such a good temper, since his master had said this, as a servant, he had to obey, so he immediately agreed. Just as the officials had expected, after Wang Zhen took over the Yang clan, he quickly sent someone to reach an agreement with Yang Qindong. No one knew what sort of promise had been made, but in any case, Yang Qindong, the victim, was no longer pursuing the matter. As a result, some of the officials who wanted to take advantage of the situation had no chance. In the palace, Wang Zhen did not go back on his word and promoted Mao Mu to head eunuch of the ceremony directorate. Henceforth, this person would be one of the leading eunuchs in the organization. The gloomy Xi Ning walked into Wang Zhen's room. Once there was no one else present, he immediately got down on his knees. My thanks to eunuch Wang for saving my brother. If you have any orders, Xi Ning will do his best to repay them. Ha, eunuch Xi, what are you doing? Get up, get up. Wang Zhen helped Xi Ning up from the ground with a smile. We all serve His Majesty, so isn't it only right for us to help each other? As for that Yang Shi Ma, he magnanimously let this matter pass. You two brothers should know how to be grateful. At least for the time being, don't think about provoking him, understand? Since he had promised not to harass Yang Qindong, Wang Zhen had to do it. At least for the time being, he still had to do it. This was also related to his own interests. Yes. Since eunuch Wang has spoken, I will naturally obey. Then, do you need this eunuch to personally go to the Yang clan and meet the multi-talented Dong Shuai? Even though Xi Ning was smiling, his face still gave people a gloomy feeling. Perhaps only when he was on duty in front of His Majesty would his smile become truly brilliant. That's not necessary. This eunuch asked Ji Ning to go there before, which is already giving him enough face. There's no need for eunuch Xi to make a trip for such a small matter. Wang Zhen shook his head. Regarding Yang Qindong, his feelings were somewhat complicated. No matter what, this person was the descendant of the three Yang Qindong. Logically speaking, this person should be his enemy. But for the sake of benefits, they were bound together. Within a limited range, he would help as much as he could. But once things got troublesome, he would decisively give up on Yang Qindong. Of course, he didn't need such a chess piece in his eyes. He also didn't want more people to come into contact with him. It was enough to have Mao Mu as a bridge. As for Xi Ning, this person was extremely smart. If he was able to establish a connection with Wang Zhen, who knew how much benefits he would get. Xi Ning said this just to express his attitude. He didn't want to make things too difficult for Wang Zhen. Since he didn't need to make an appearance, who would be willing to make an apology? He immediately promised that he wouldn't find Yang Qindong to express his gratitude, nor would he cause trouble for him. In the future, everyone would mind their own business. Then, he asked about his younger brother Xi Sheng. This was the main reason why he came. He asked when his younger brother would be released. Chapter 96. After a while. The imperial prison is our territory anyway. Your brother won't suffer there. If you want, you can go see him at any time. As for releasing him, I'll see when the emperor is in a good mood. I'll plead for mercy for you. Wang Zhen thought about it, but he still didn't want to release Xi Sheng. Firstly, he wanted to give the officials an explanation. He couldn't just release Xi Sheng right after he started yelling about fighting and killing. That would be too obvious of favoritism. Secondly, he wanted to give the other eunuchs a warning. If they dared to make a move without permission, they had to be prepared to go to the imperial prison. Alright, we'll listen to eunuch Wang. Xi Ning also knew that it would be inappropriate to release Xi Sheng now. He thought about how the officials were living a life worse than death in the imperial prison. However, his younger brother was there, which was equivalent to recuperating. There was nothing to worry about. Things seemed to have calmed down. However, through this incident, Yang Qindong saw some people's hearts. For example, his brother's behavior disappointed the sixth young master. Eldest brother, second brother, and third brother didn't come. Only fourth brother and fifth brother came to see him. Fifth brother came alone. After seeing that Yang Qindong was fine, he left with peace of mind. Not only did fourth brother come, but he also brought Duke of Wei Su Qin's eldest son, Su Qingzong. Yang Qindong naturally knew why his three brothers didn't come. First, it was because Yang Qindong had offended Xi Sheng and Xi Ning. They were afraid of being implicated, so they didn't dare to come. Fifth brother was more honest and didn't think too much. As for fourth brother, he obviously came for something. In the side hall, Yang Qindong walked out with Qiao Yin and Lady Snow on his left and right. Immediately, Yang Yang and young master Su Qingzong looked at him enviously, as if he was a pig. Thank you for your trouble, fourth brother and young master Su. Yang Qindong sat down and cupped his hands, looking as if he still couldn't walk properly. When it came to serious matters, Yang Yang seemed to be a lot more agitated. Sixth brother, you've suffered a lot this time. That Xi Sheng is really too much of a bully. Do you want me to find a few people to secretly beat him up? Oh. Fourth brother has this kind of ability. Yang Qindong knew that Yang Qindong was putting on an act in front of him, but he still pretended to be surprised, as if he would agree at any time. Seeing that Yang Qindong was about to get serious, Yang Qindong's complexion immediately changed. He changed his tone and said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold. Let's wait for a while. When the limelight is over, it won't be too late to deal with him." Yang Qindong smiled and shook his head. His fourth brother was already in his 30s, but sometimes he behaved like a child. Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't mind. Instead, he looked at Su Qingzong and cupped his fists. "Brother Su, I'm really sorry to trouble you to come here. Sixth young master, please don't say that. In fact, this young master has come here to ask for a favor." Su Qingzong's expression was somewhat conflicted, as if he had something to ask but didn't know how to say it. "Oh. Brother Su, feel free to speak your mind. There are no outsiders here." Yang Qindong didn't even look at Xiao Yin and Madame Shui. They were going to be his women, so of course, they weren't outsiders. Qiao Yin and Madame Snow were very excited by Yang Qindong's actions. Their gazes on Yang Qindong became much gentler. Originally, Su Qingzong couldn't say some things in front of the two women. However, since Yang Qindong said so, unless he gave up on his purpose, he had to say it. "Well, since the sixth young master doesn't treat me as an outsider, then I'll say it. Actually, in addition to visiting the sixth young master, I have another thing that Madame Xiang of the Nine Arts Workshop asked me to do." As he spoke, he paid attention to Yang Qindong's reaction. He didn't seem surprised or surprised at all. However, Madame Shui, who was standing next to him, seemed a little unnatural. Seeing that Yang Qindong didn't ask or interrupt him, Su Qingzong simply gritted his teeth and told him about Madame Shui's request. Seeing that the 100 Flowers Hall is about to close, Madame Xiang wants to learn some songs from the sixth young master so that more people can hear the sounds of nature. Yes, we've been listening to new songs recently. If we don't hear it, We'll feel uncomfortable. Young Master Su's idea is also our idea. Yang Yang saw Su Qingzong give him a look and immediately spoke up to help him. One was the eldest son of Duke Wei, and the other was Yang Qindong's fourth brother. It was obvious that Madame Xiang had put in a lot of effort and was determined to get these two people to intercede. Unfortunately, Madame Xiang didn't know Yang Qindong, nor did she know his ambition. If Madame Xiang was just an ordinary entertainer, perhaps Yang Qindong would have helped her. He would have taught her 2 or 3 songs casually, which would have saved everyone's face. But who was Madame Xiang? She was a talent. Since she was a talent and Yang Qindong had met her, there was no reason for him to let her go. Madame Shui was already in his hands and on his bed. Where was Madame Xiang? Su Qingzong and Yang Qindong, who had been waiting for a reply, felt their hearts skip a beat. They thought that they would definitely get what they wanted, but something went wrong. Was Yang Qindong really not willing to give them face? I'm sorry, Brother Su, fourth brother. It's not that I don't want to give you face, but I think too highly of Madame Xiang. I think she just wants to be an entertainer and stay in the small 9 arts workshop. She won't be able to achieve anything in her life. It's better for her to come here. I have a big platform here, and I'm sure she'll have room to express herself. Then, she can learn more new songs. Yang Qindong's words were very clear. It was not that he didn't want to give them face, but he wanted to take Madame Xiang in. Since he wanted to keep her for his own use, why would he teach her a new song and let her have more strength to stand on her own? Hearing such a reason and answer, the two people didn't know what to say for a while. If it had been any other way to refuse, the two of them would have been angry. However, Yang Qindong had said that everything was for his own benefit, and that he wanted to take Madame Xiang in. What else could they say? Criticize him for being overbearing? No matter what era it was, there was one principle that didn't change. Those who were capable would rise, and those who were mediocre would fall. In terms of new songs, Yang Qindong's performance was definitely the best. He naturally had a certain amount of authority in this area, so it was hard for others to refute his words. Sixth young master, what do you mean by a big platform? Even though Su Qingzong understood what he meant, he still didn't want to give up. The immortal abode. The immortal abode that even His Majesty knows of is huge and has a good environment. It's not something a small 9 arts workshop can compare to. When the time comes, the number of customers there will be many times greater than the current 9 arts workshop. Singing new songs there will be more influence, and naturally, you'll be able to earn even more money. Yang Qindong's answer could be said to be powerful and resonant, thus making Su Qingzong and Yang Yang shut their mouths. The immortal abode was still under renovation, and in order to maintain a sense of mystery, it didn't allow outsiders to casually investigate. However, its reputation had long since spread far and wide. Apart from the fact that His Majesty knew of it and had promised to personally attend the opening ceremony, there was another important reason for its influence. It was said that a total of 300,000 taels of silver had been invested. 300,000 taels. 1 tael of silver could be exchanged for 1,000 copper coins, and 1 copper coin could buy 2 small steamed buns. If that was the case, 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 1,000 yuan in the modern era. 300,000 taels of silver was equivalent to 300 million yuan in the modern era. It was just a restaurant, yet such a huge investment had been made. It was no wonder that everyone was so curious about it. As a result, the restaurant industry in the capital had already been dealt a heavy blow before it even opened. Some restaurant owners were already considering selling their businesses. They were worried that once the immortal abode opened, everyone would go there to spend money. What would they do then? A restaurant that hadn't even opened yet was already enough to make everyone in the same industry feel insecure, to say nothing of the common folk. They were all waiting with bated breath, wondering what the immortal abode would be like after investing so much money in it. Would it really become the abode of a deity? Yang Qindong was using the immortal abode as a platform, so a small 9 arts workshop naturally couldn't compare to it. Su Qingzong, who was still a little unconvinced, couldn't say anything more. After a while, the two of them dejectedly left. Yang Qindong and the other two remained in the side hall. Young master, have you really taken a liking to Lady Xiang? Out of curiosity or jealousy, Madame Xue asked the question out of jealousy. Ha, her dancing isn't bad. Yang Qindong didn't answer the question. Then, when he saw that Madame Snow and Xiao Yin didn't seem to care, he put on a straight face and said, "Let me tell you, I have a lot of property, and there are many opportunities for you to show off. Let alone the three of you, even if a dozen talents like you came, the young master would still be able to handle them all. So, don't even think about fighting amongst yourselves. If Lady Xiang doesn't come, then it's fine. But if she does, then we'll be good sisters. If I find out who played a role in this, I won't punish her. I'll just let her leave the Yang clan." Yang Qindong said these words very seriously and solemnly. It seemed that he rarely saw Yang Qindong like this. For a moment, Xiao Yin and Lady Xue's faces changed. Because they once had him, they were even more afraid of losing him now. They immediately knelt on the ground. "Young master, we're just asking. We don't have that kind of thought. Come on, get up." When the two women knelt, Yang Qindong's heart ached. He quickly reached out to help them up and held them in his arms. "I'll set a rule. Don't kneel so often in the future. What if you hurt your knees? The young master will feel sorry for you. Well, now let this young master see if you're really hurt. Let's go to the bedroom." Since the scene in the morning, the relationship between Yang Qindong and the two women had undergone a qualitative change. Although the last step hadn't been taken yet, it was only a matter of time. Yang Qindong, who already knew what was going on, decided to do both of them today. Now was the best time. Ah! How could the two women not know what the young master was going to do? For a moment, their faces flushed red. But how could they be a match for Yang Qindong, who was so powerful? Moreover, they had been looking forward to it. Now that they were finally going to get what they wanted, they were overjoyed. How could they back down? Not long after, the three of them entered the bedroom, and the sounds of spring filled the air, 100,000 words omitted here. Chapter 97. Jiu Arts Workshop. After Su Qingzong and Yang Yang left the Yang family manor, they came to this place and saw Cui Nar and Dong Hanxiang, who were waiting for news. In Lady Xiang's boudoir, the two of them told the story of Yang Qindong's request. Originally, it was a man's pride to be able to come to Miss Xiang's room. But today, they felt as if their butts were on fire. They left after telling her everything. They didn't want to stay a moment longer. Cui Nar, Miss Xiang, and her maid, Chun Tao, were left looking at each other. Cui Nar couldn't help but say, "Men are all bad. Dong Shui has already taken Miss Xue. Does he want to take our Xiang, or? Who does he think he is?" It was no wonder that Cui Nar was so angry. Miss Xiang was her money tree. Although Jiu Arts Workshop was not under her name, she was just a manager. In the words of the later generations, she was a senior manager. But here, her words carried a lot of weight. Once Miss Xiang left, the business of Jiu Arts Workshop would be greatly affected. At that time, her income would be reduced by more than half. How could she live then? Cui Nar's tone was resolute. Miss Xiang heard it, but she acted as if she didn't hear it. Instead, she said something that surprised everyone. "Sister, you can follow Dong Shui like Mu Lily. When the time comes, as long as I make this request, I'm sure he will agree." What? Cui Nar was shocked. She stared at Miss Shui as if she didn't know her. You really want to go to Dong Shui? He is indeed talented, but he already has a powerful person like Miss Shui. If you go there, what status will you have? Will you be a concubine? Sister, I don't understand what you're saying. With our background, who can we be the first wife if we were to be with him? If we're lucky, we'll be pampered for a few more years. If we're unlucky, we'll be treated like a maid in the end. Even if Madame Shui is one step ahead of us, so what? She can't become a wife either. Even if she can become a concubine, it depends on Dong Shui's mood. As she spoke, Lady Xiang shook her head with a sad expression. This was the tragedy of the hierarchy. As a concubine, she seemed to be glorious in front of others, but in reality, she was just a lowly person. She was even worse than an ordinary person. With this kind of status, which good family would want them? Even if she did meet one and married him, as she aged, the number of people who had a good ending could be counted on one's fingers. Cui Nar was speechless for a while after being exposed by Madame Xiang. She sat there for a long time without saying anything. Sister, just promise Xiang that you'll go to the East Marshal's place with her. Otherwise, if something like what happened in 100 Flowers Hall happened in our 9 Arts workshop, do you think someone as daring as Dong Shui would appear? For the sake of performing artists like us, you're willing to offend the nobles and even take a stab? Forget it, that kind of person will never appear in the future. Madame Xiang shook her head as she spoke. This time, she was able to make the decision to side with Yang Qindong so quickly because of the 100 Flowers Hall incident. Perhaps this Dong Shui really was someone who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. After Madame Xiang made her decision, she began to convince Cui Nar. In the end, she was actually convinced. She agreed to let Madame Xiang find Yang Qindong and serve him. In exchange, she had to hand over Cui Nar and the servant girl Chun Tao's indenture contracts. After making her decision, Madame Xiang left the 9 Arts workshop. She brought the servant girl Chun Tao with her and headed straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Inside the Yang Manor, Yang Qindong had already walked out of his bedroom, leaving behind Xiao Yin and Madame Shui, whose bodies were as soft as shrimps. Being young really was a good thing. Add that to the fact that he had great stamina, and Yang Qindong fought the 2 girls until they begged for mercy and fainted on the bed. He only rested for a short while before returning to the rear courtyard to continue training the 100 or so servants of the immortal abode. Compared to 2 days ago, these people had improved quite a bit. With the addition of Mu Lily as a manager, these people became much more obedient. Just as he was watching them train with satisfaction, Tiger's mane appeared. He half knelt and said, "Young master, Madame Xiang is here." "Oh, so fast." Yang Qindong was satisfied with the other party's decisiveness. If there hadn't been any news from her, he would have had to consider whether or not to give up on her. Even though this girl who looked a lot like the young Guanjilin of the future had indeed moved his heart, if she didn't want to rely on him, he wouldn't force her against her will. There were countless beautiful women in the world. How could he possibly have all of them? From Yang Qindong's point of view, there had to be a foundation of feelings between men and women. Otherwise, what difference would it be from going to the red light district to find a woman? Bring her to the side hall to wait, Yang Qindong instructed. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Madame Xiang and her maid, Chun Tao, arrived at the side hall in the rear courtyard. As soon as they sat down, the sound of footsteps could be heard nearby. It was Yang Qindong, dressed in green robes, walking in. When she saw Yang Qindong's figure from afar, Madame Xiang fell to her knees with a thump. As soon as the 6th young master entered the hall, her charming voice rang out. "Dong Shui, Xiang, begs you to take me in. My older sister, Cui Na, and my maid, Chun Tao, are also here. In the future, even if I have to work like a cow or a horse, I'll be satisfied with just a mouthful of rice to eat. You don't need to work like a cow or a horse. What you need to do is to rise above others," Yang Qindong replied firmly. Then, he looked at Tiger's mane, who was standing in the hall. "Do you know what to do? Also, After you take their slave contracts, find Mao Mu and tell him that you will raise their registration. Yes. Tiger's mane cupped his fists and agreed. Then, he stepped back. Madame Xiang and Chun Tao were left behind. They looked at Yang Qindong, who had just sat down, in surprise. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Yang Qindong was very puzzled. He thought that there was something on his face, so he touched it with his hand, but found nothing. Dong Shuai. What did you just say? You said that you will raise our registration. Madame Shui looked at him in disbelief. She was afraid that she had misheard him. That's right. What's wrong? Didn't my fourth brother tell you? Alas, it's my fault. I didn't tell you clearly. Now, I won't hide it from you. Madame Shui and the other two have been raised and have become good people. Yang Qindong thought about it. It seemed that he really didn't mention it to his fourth brother. He couldn't help but smile and didn't take it seriously. However, this was not a big deal in Yang Qindong's eyes. In Madame Xiang's eyes, it was completely different. If a lowly person wanted to raise their status, it was not only possible to spend a lot of money, but also needed the approval of the higher-ups. It even needed someone from the palace to do it. These conditions were far beyond their ability and they didn't dare to think about it. However, all of this seemed to be a piece of cake for Yang Qindong. He just needed to say a few words and someone would do it for him. This was the power of authority. It was far from something that ordinary people like them could imagine. After receiving Yang Qindong's affirmation, Madame Xiang immediately burst into tears of joy. Chun Tao, the maid beside her, also couldn't stop crying. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, hated seeing women cry the most. He couldn't quite accept it, so he found an excuse to get them to bring Cui Na, over as well, and let Yang Si and Yang Wu follow them to do their errands. Tiger's mane was very efficient. They received the order in the morning, and everything was done in the evening. They brought 3 new contracts with the official seal of the Ming dynasty. That was to say, from this moment on, Madame Xiang and the other two were free. They were no longer lowly people who were looked down upon by others. They were dignified girls from good families. The 3 of them hugged each other and cried for a long time. In the inner courtyard, Yang Qindong called Xiaoyin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang and told them the rules of the Yang family in front of them. Regardless of one's background, contribution and hard work were all important. As long as one was willing to put in the effort, they would be richly rewarded. On the other hand, if one wanted to use their status to bully others, then they should prepare to leave the Yang family. None of the 7 girls complained about this, and they all expressed that they would do their best. With the addition of Madame Shui and Madame Xiang, Yang Qindong's training program sped up, and everything proceeded smoothly. At this time, the interior of the immortal abode was in the final stages of its renovation, and it would be ready to open for business in half a month. The goods produced in Crimson City were transported by sea to Tientsin, where they would be transported to the capital. With Wang Zhen's help, the journey to the capital was smooth and unimpeded. A large number of goods were transported to the capital's immortal abode, and the 100 men and women who had been trained began to take up their posts. They used what they had learned to manage everything in an orderly fashion. Worth mentioning were the 2 leaders, Mu Lili and Cui Na. Their methods of management were far superior to Yang Qindong's. The 100 men were divided into 2 groups, each led by one of them. For a moment, there seemed to be competition between them, which greatly increased the efficiency of the work. They had originally thought that they would need another 7 or 8 days to sort everything out, but thanks to the efforts of the 2 former procuress sisters, they could open for business ahead of time. An auspicious date was chosen, and the opening was set for the 6th day of the 10th month. Yang Baozhong had already announced the opening of the immortal abode on the 6th day of the 10th month, and he had also emphasized that the immortal abode would be issuing membership cards to serve its esteemed guests. Only members would be allowed to use the private rooms on the 2nd floor, and the private rooms on the 1st floor would allow them to enjoy a higher quality of service. Moreover, on the opening day of the immortal abode, members would be able to enjoy the festivities with the emperor and the various ministers, and they would be able to interact with the people up close. As for the specifics, they could consult the immortal abode. Chapter 98. As soon as the news spread, many people flocked to the immortal abode like a flock of ducks, especially wealthy merchants. They all came to the information desk outside the immortal abode to ask for advice. The person who received them was the immortal abode's external manager, Yang Fu. Using his silver tongue, he managed to sway everyone who came, telling them all about the benefits of a membership card. For example, a membership card was a symbol of one's status, allowing them to enjoy a higher level of service and be looked upon with respect. With a membership card, they could enter private rooms or private rooms on the second floor, allowing them to interact with even more important figures. With a membership card, once a friend came here and received it, it would be equivalent to gaining unparalleled face. They would be dazzled, and at the same time, treat you with even more respect. More importantly, the money used to apply for a membership card wasn't given to the immortal abode. Instead, it was deposited here first, saving them the trouble of bringing large amounts of silver with them when they came out to spend. More importantly, with a membership card, they could also enjoy a discount when they spent money. In descending order, there were 4 types of cards: platinum card, gold card, and silver card. These could be bought with money. What couldn't be bought with money was the supreme card. With this card, spending was completely free. Of course, those who could obtain a supreme card were also not ordinary people. For example, up until now, the only person who had such a card was the real owner, Yang Qindong. Platinum card, a one-time deposit of 20,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the second floor or private room on the first floor, and enjoy a 20% discount when you spent money. Gold card, a one-time deposit of 5,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the second floor or private room on the first floor, and enjoy a 10% discount when you spent money. Silver card, a one-time deposit of 1,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the first floor, but not the second floor, and enjoy a 5% discount when you spent money. As for non-members, sorry, but if they wanted to enter the immortal abode, they could only enter the main hall on the first floor. There were over 100 tables there, enough to accommodate over 1,000 people at once. However, no matter how lively the main hall was, if one didn't have a membership card, even if the private room on the first floor or the private room on the second floor were empty, they still weren't allowed to enter. This was the benefit of the membership system. All membership cards can be used to deduct the funds in the card when spending money. In other words, as long as you had a membership card, you could come to the immortal abode without bringing a single copper coin. After eating and drinking, you could just hand your membership card over to the waiter and register your bill. Just imagine how cool that would be. Of course, the membership card also had a minimum limit. That was, when the amount was less than 1/10 of the original amount, there would be a reminder to remind you that you had to top it up again. Using a silver card as an example, 1/10 of 1,000 taels of silver would be 100 taels of silver. When the balance of the card was less than 100 taels of silver, the service staff would remind you to top up the card so that you could continue using it. At the same time, you could top up more silver in one go to increase your membership level. For example, if a silver card member were to top up 5,000 taels of silver, he would be promoted to a gold card member. Of course, for those who refused to recharge, once the amount in the card was used up, the card would be cancelled after 3 months. If they wanted to recharge, they would have to apply again. If there was a deficit in the previous card, they would have to make up for it. After Yang Fu explained the situation in detail, many people were tempted, especially those merchants who had money but didn't have high statuses. In the Great Ming Dynasty, a merchant's residence was ranked 3rd. It was one level lower than the common people's residence, which was the so-called good family. People like them had a lot of money, but they didn't have high social status. The goal of many of them was to improve their social status by interacting more with the government. Now that the immortal abode had given them such an opportunity, how could these merchants, who wouldn't wake up early without benefits, not be tempted? Merchants were smart. It was precisely because of this that some people suggested that while the immortal abode's membership system seemed good, why didn't so many high officials and nobles come here to spend money? If only merchants came, then it would lose its original meaning. In response, Yang Fu confidently smiled and replied, "My lord has already sent gold cards to all officials of the third rank and above in the capital. Although it's a membership card that doesn't have a deposit amount, they can enjoy a 20% discount. I'm sure that they will definitely come. Moreover, when the immortal abode opens for business, even the emperor, empress, and officials will appear here. With this kind of influence, how could there be any worry that no officials will come? Here, there's singing and dancing, fine wine, and delicacies that can't be seen anywhere else. The environment is the best, and the service is the best. How could there be no customers?" When they heard that even the emperor would come here for the opening, the merchants were instantly filled with confidence. Those who paid to apply for membership cards came one after another. The Ming dynasty had just gone through the rule of literature, and the country was rich and the people were strong. Many merchants had plenty of money, so applying for a membership card wasn't a big deal. Those with money directly applied for platinum cards, while those with less money applied for gold cards. There were even some who applied for silver cards as a test. They wanted to see if the immortal abode was as good as Yang Fu said, and then consider adding more money to apply for a better membership card. In just 7 days, the first batch of members was tallied up. There were more than 40 people with platinum cards, and the value of the cards was more than 800,000 taels. There were more than 200 people with gold cards, and the value of the cards was more than 1 million taels. There were more than 400 people with silver cards, and the value of the cards was more than 400,000 taels. In just 7 days, more than 2 million taels had been raised. When news of this money-making speed spread, the entire capital was thrown into an uproar. It had to be known that the Ming dynasty had a very low tax rate, which was lower than the current 10% tax rate. In addition, the Ming dynasty's taxes didn't count as business taxes. In theory, business taxes went to the emperor's private funds, but because there was no strict policy, the emperor could only rely on eunuchs to collect them. As a result, it was very unstable. For example, the Wanli emperor's private funds were even richer than the national treasury. The Chongzhen emperor was as poor as a dog. As a result, the entire Ming dynasty's annual tax revenue was only 4 to 5 million taels. But before the immortal abode had even opened for business, it had already collected nearly half of that. How could anyone not be shocked? In the imperial palace, Wang Zhen was grinning from ear to ear after receiving the report from the Eastern Depot. He had originally been worried that the immortal abode wouldn't be able to bring him enough profit, but now, it seemed that he didn't need to worry at all. Wang Zhen immediately ordered the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard not to disturb the immortal abode in the future. On the contrary, they were to increase the patrols in the area, and if anyone was found to be causing trouble, they were to be immediately arrested. As a result, the immortal abode's business rose to another level. No one dared to mess around here, and no one dared to eat for free. With such a good environment, it would only attract more and more people. After several days of preparation, the day of the opening finally arrived. It was currently autumn in the capital, and the weather was cool and refreshing, neither hot nor cold. On the morning of the 6th day of the 10th lunar month, the area where Xingyang Gate and Great Ming Gate intersected was bustling with activity. The current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, had already been informed of this matter. Thus, after the morning court session, the emperor, who had always wanted to have fun, led a group of civil and military officials from the imperial city to the outer city, their target the immortal abode. Unlike the emperor's usual excursions, Zhu Qizhen had brought Empress Qianshi with him. This was something that Yang Qindong had specially invited. In his own words, this was called, the emperor's family enjoying the pleasures of the common people. Wang Zhen was naturally in full agreement with this. With the binding of benefits, the greater the immortal abode's reputation, the more benefits he would receive in the future. In the Empress Palace, Qian Shi was rather excited. This was one of the rare occasions where she would accompany the emperor on an excursion. For this reason, she, who had never been good at dressing up, rummaged through her chests and drawers to find quite a few gold and silver ornaments. She had the palace maids help her try them on one by one, and in the end, she chose a dignified outfit. She wore a jade crown with dragon and phoenix pearls, a red robe with large sleeves, a red veil, a red silk skirt, and a red bead. Her hair was tied into a bun with dragon and phoenix ornaments, and the robe was embroidered with golden dragon and phoenix patterns. Such a dignified outfit was almost comparable to the one worn by the empress. Only then did Qian Shi walk out of the imperial palace, satisfied. She boarded the dragon carriage and went with Zhu Qizhen to the immortal abode. When the emperor went on an excursion, his safety naturally had to be taken into consideration. Along the way, the embroidered uniformed guards and foreigners from the Eastern Palace had long since filled the streets. Several thousand people had been mobilized, and their silhouettes filled the streets outside the immortal abode. Yang Qindong, who had already arrived at the immortal abode, didn't raise any objections. Although the appearance of the foreigners had prevented many commoners from approaching the immortal abode, this wasn't a place for commoners to spend their time. Besides, even though it was said to be enjoying the festivities with the commoners, there were too many commoners here, so there was no way to take care of their safety. If something were to happen, the reputation of the immortal abode would be completely ruined. Since the commoners couldn't get close, the area in front of the immortal abode was much more spacious. A red carpet over 100 meters long had already been laid out here. It was extremely eye-catching from a distance. This was the arrangement Yang Qindong had made to welcome the emperor. As they walked the red carpet all the way to the immortal abode, they basked in the attention of tens of thousands of people. The spectators had been changed from officials to commoners. By the time the emperor's dragon carriage arrived at the end of the red carpet, Yang Qindong was already waiting there in his green robes. In the entire court, it seemed that Yang Qindong was the only one who didn't wear his official robes and only wore his green robes. Everyone else was afraid that others wouldn't know his identity. Only this young master didn't care about what others thought of him. He continued to act according to his own wishes. This subject kneels to welcome your majesty, your majesty, your majesty. May your majesty live for 10,000 years. Please descend from the carriage and walk, Yang Qindong said in a booming voice as he knelt on the red carpet. Chapter 99. If it was any other time, this would be considered as blocking the emperor's way. But today, no matter if it was the palace guards or the ministers, no one tried to stop it. It was as if everything was perfectly justified. Hee, it's Minister Yang. Since that's the case, Empress, let's get off the carriage together and see what tricks he's up to. Ingzong, Zhu Qizhen, seemed to be in a good mood. As he laughed, he helped Empress Qian onto the dragon carriage and walked onto the red carpet. Long live the emperor! Just as they stood firmly on the ground, shouts sounded from all around them. A group of commoners who came to watch the show instinctively knelt on the ground the moment they saw the emperor's face. In addition, there were many people that Yang Qindong had arranged to guide the crowd. Instantly, shouts of "Long live the emperor" rang out from all directions. The momentum was so great that it was much louder than the voices of the ministers in the imperial court. At first, Ingzong was shocked. He instinctively thought that there was some kind of danger and wanted to turn around and run. However, when he saw that it was the crowd cheering for him, he laughed and then raised his hand generously to the crowd. Everyone, please rise. Thank you for your majesty. The crowd of commoners who came to watch the show climbed up from the ground and looked at Zhu Qizhen excitedly. Their expressions were filled with admiration, but more than that, it was envy. Zhu Qizhen seemed to enjoy this kind of gaze. He did not move quickly. It felt as if he was taking care of Empress Qian, but in reality, he was enjoying this moment of being the center of attention. Yang Qindong acted as if he did not know about this. He led the way in front and looked left and right from time to time. He used his insight to see if there was any danger in the surroundings. Even though the area was already filled with spies from the Eastern Faction Guards and the embroidered uniform guards, and the Security Bureau had also sent out quite a few people, it was better to be safe than sorry. If something really happened to Ingzong today, even if he didn't flee, he would still revolt. Fortunately, no accidents happened along the way. Even though the people were curious about what the emperor looked like, under the stern gazes of the Eastern Faction Guards, the embroidered uniform guards, and the warden's office of the 5 cities, no one had the courage to break the order and cause trouble. Ingzong held Empress Qian's hand and walked forward step by step. Along the way, he frequently raised his hand to the people around him to show off his might as the Son of Heaven. Just like that, when they were halfway through the journey, shouts suddenly sounded from all directions, completely drowning out the noisy discussions around them. In our great Ming dynasty, the mountains are the lofty heads. In our great Ming dynasty, the rivers flow like hot blood. In our great Ming dynasty, the trees are rooted to the ground. In our great Ming dynasty, the clouds hold hands. The vast plains are wrapped with jade belts, the fields are woven with colored silk, the winds of the great Ming rise, the mighty winds of the great Ming shake the heavens and roar. As soon as the majestic voice rang out, everyone was startled at first. Then, General Fan Zhong rushed out from the side to protect the emperor. Even Empress Qian turned pale at this moment. On the other hand, Ingzong, Zhu Qizhen, was surprised at first, but when he understood what everyone was singing, he suddenly burst into laughter. Good! What a mighty and majestic voice! What a good song! Beloved official Yang, is this the new song the people were talking about? Yang Qindong sighed in admiration. As expected of the emperor. His reactions were quick, and his composure was extraordinary. He strode over and said, Your Majesty, this is the new song this subject composed. It's called, Our Great Ming Dynasty. Our Great Ming Dynasty is a good song. Good, good. You deserve a reward. When Zhu Qizhen heard the 50 male attendants of the immortal abode singing the song together with the crowd, he was extremely happy. He even shouted out a good twice. Thank you for your reward, Your Majesty. Yang Qindong was also overjoyed. He thanked the emperor on behalf of the 50 attendants. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. A song of praise made Zhu Qizhen very happy. His footsteps seemed to be much lighter as he continued walking. Our great Ming dynasty has many beautiful mountains and rivers. Our great Ming dynasty is rich in natural resources. Our great Ming dynasty's people are the most hardworking. Our great Ming dynasty is even more outstanding now. The 4 seas meet guests, the 5 continents make friends, the winds of the great Ming dynasty rise, the mighty winds of the great Ming dynasty shake the heavens. Along the way, Zhu Qizhen could hear the singing of our great Ming dynasty. He felt as if he was floating in the air. It wasn't just the emperor who felt this way. Even the officials following behind him felt their spirits lifted when they heard this majestic song. Some of the officials who were originally disdainful of the so-called new song began to pay attention to it at this moment. Only now did they realize that if a song was well composed, it might really be able to stir the hearts of people. Our great Ming dynasty was sung over and over again. By the 3rd time it was sung, Ingzong and Empress Qian had already arrived in front of the immortal abode's gates. The entire area was covered in red silk, making it look like a sea of red. Your Majesty, this subject will be so bold as to invite the 2 of you to cut the ribbon. In addition, I would like to invite Lord Hu Mang to come forward as well. Yang Qindong knelt on the ground again and begged loudly. Cut the ribbon. What's the meaning behind that? Ingzong asked curiously. Your Majesty, cutting the ribbon means cutting the ribbon. It's an auspicious omen for the opening of a new store, Yang Qindong replied with a smile. Interesting. Beloved official Yang, please make the arrangements. Ingzong also wanted to see what cutting the ribbon was, so he immediately agreed. Since the emperor had already agreed, the empress naturally nodded with a smile as well. Empress Qian was also a beauty of her generation, and she was also of noble character. Since the two of them had agreed, the Minister of Rites, Hu Mang, naturally couldn't refuse either. Dressed in the robes of a standard second-rank official, he strode over to the ribbon-cutting stage in front of the immortal abode. In front of a window on the second floor of the immortal abode, a young girl saw Hu Mang walk onto the stage. She immediately shouted excitedly, young miss, look. Lord Hu Mang is also on stage. He's standing right next to His Majesty. That's enough, I saw it. Also, little Qing, can you not be so excited here? If someone hears you, they'll say that the women of the Hu clan have no manners. Hu Yanxiang, who was called Miss, pretended to be angry and glared at her maid Shaoqing. Then she looked at the ribbon-cutting stage with a sweet face. When she saw that there were only the emperor, the empress, her grandfather, and Yang Qindong on the stage, her face was full of joy. Out of so many ministers, only his grandfather was called to the stage. Was this hinting at something? Hu Yan thought she was smart. She thought this was Yang Qindong's intentional arrangement. He wanted to raise her grandfather's prestige, and at the same time, express his special feelings for the Hu clan. This moved her greatly, but also made her regret it. What made her regret was that she only found out about Yang Qindong's assassination a long time later. Hu Zhangning knew his daughter's temperament, so he gave strict orders that no one was to speak of it. It wasn't until later, when Hu Yan went to visit Yang Duo, that she found out. She was so worried she cried. She even pestered her seventh sister to go to the Yang Qindong manor. Only when she saw that Yang Qindong was still as lively as ever did she finally relax. As someone who had been there before, how could Yang Duo not see Hu Yan's feelings for her seventh brother? She immediately smiled and told her seventh brother to give Hu Yan a gift. Her worries weren't in vain. Yang Qindong thought for a moment, then gave the most prestigious card in the immortal abode to Hu Yan. He even invited her to attend the opening ceremony of the immortal abode. With this card, Hu Yan had special privileges. Before the immortal abode was open to the public, she had the right to enter in advance. As a result, she was the first to witness the prosperity of the immortal abode. Today, she even brought her servant little Qing with her to the second floor of the immortal abode. She found the best vantage point to watch the opening ceremony. Hu Yan's heart was filled with sweetness. However, what she didn't know was that Yang Qindong hadn't invited Hu Yan to the stage because of her. Instead, it was because Hu Yan was the oldest among the civil officials. He was already 73 years old. Out of respect for the elderly and love for the young, he invited Hu Yan to the stage. In truth, Yang Qindong had also wanted to invite Du Qing, Zhang Fu, to the stage. He was already 73 years old, but after considering that he didn't get along with Wang Zhen and the others, he didn't want to cause any more trouble. On the stage, Ingzong, Empress Qian, Hu Yan, and Yang Qindong had just taken their places when four women in kipeos walked out of the immortal abode's main entrance. They were Yang Duo, Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. The four of them were all extremely beautiful. Coupled with their exquisite cheongsams, they attracted everyone's attention as soon as they appeared. The four women looked like celestial fairies. Each of them carried a copper tray with a pair of scissors on it. These were the props used for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Wow! They're so beautiful. What are they wearing? How can their figures be so perfect? That's right. If my concubines wore these clothes, wouldn't they be just as beautiful? Faced with this kind of discussion, someone in the crowd quickly responded. These clothes are called kipeos. They're already on sale at the Sky Beyond Trading Company next to the immortal abode. Even if you have finished products, you can also customize them. Is that so? Our great Ming dynasty also has something like this for sale. That's great. I'll go take a look at the Sky Beyond Trading Company when I get back. After receiving this response, some of the men in the crowd became even more excited. They were already imagining what their wives would look like if they put on these beautiful kipeos. These kinds of discussions and responses could be seen everywhere in the crowd. The people from the security bureau had all become salesmen, working hard for the Sky Beyond Trading Company's future prosperity. At this time, everyone's attention had already shifted from the emperor and empress to Qiao Yin and the other 3 women. The appearance of the 4 women not only attracted the gazes of the spectators, even Yingzong and Empress Qian, who were standing on the ceremonial stage, looked at the 4 women with great interest. However, their eyes were filled with a kind of admiration. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.